Good morning. Today is Thursday, December 15th, and the time is 9:07. The time for recess has now expired, and the AB 3121 task force meeting is now back in session. Before we begin, let's have Parliamentarian Johnson call the roll for attendance and determine whether we have quorum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will begin with Chair Moore.
Present.
Chair Moore is present. Vice Chair Brown?
Present.
Vice Chair Brown is present. Member Bradford?
Here.
Member Bradford is present. Member Grills?
Present.
Member Grills is present. Member Holder?
Here.
Member Holder is present. Member Jones Sawyer? I'm sorry, Member Jones Sawyer? Member Jones Sawyer is not here. Member Lewis?
Here.
Member Lewis is present. Member Montgomery Stepp? Here. Member Montgomery Stepp is present. Member Tamaki?
Here.
Member Tamaki is present. Madam Chair, there are 9 task force members, and the number needed for quorum is 5. The number of present is 8. Madam Chair, a quorum has been established.
Thank you, Parliamentarian Johnson. Welcome, members of the public, to day 2 of our 11th public hearing and 3rd in-person hearing. Task force members, please be reminded that Parliamentarian Johnson is present and available during the meeting should any member have questions about procedure. We will now proceed to agenda item number 15, which is a public comment period. And I will turn over this role to Aisha Martin-Walton, where public comment is scheduled for an hour and will end at 10:05.
Good morning, Chair Moore, task force members, and the illustrious public. My name is Aisha Martin-Walton. I'm with the Department of Justice, and the public comment will be for 1 hour, as Chair Moore has indicated. Please be advised that you will have 3 minutes to speak. And Chair Moore, is that, I'm just doing a check-in. Is
Yes.
that what we would?
3 minutes to speak. First, we will recognize 2 guests, Jolene Cook and then Bishop Henry Williams. Jolene Cook, you can.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I have a question, a point of order. Do you want the flexibility of changing the time of the public meeting? The public comment, I'm sorry.
Yes, because we started a bit late. Yeah, per person.
The amount of time for each person.
Yes.
Well, I think we want flexibility, but I guess we'll start with the regular time of 3 minutes, or are we saying we should limit it?
Yeah, I would like you to put that to the vote of the body, that you would have flexibility so that it's on the record. We dealt with increasing the time in the past, so I think it would be appropriate to make sure that everyone is in agreement, or at least that we have a majority of the members of the task force in agreement to change the time if it's
So
necessary.
does the task force member want to entertain a motion to demonstrate what the time will be? 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute?
Or you could just say 3 minutes with flexibility of decreasing it if necessary.
Can you repeat that?
Yes, you could make a motion to set the time at 3 minutes with the flexibility of reducing it if necessary.
Member Gross, you recognize.
I move that we, I've already forgotten how you phrased it. I'm so sorry. That we do the public comment at 3 minutes with the flexibility of reducing the time in response to the volume of people who would like to speak.
There's a second. It's been properly moved by Member Grills and properly seconded by Vice Chair Brown that we have a 3 minute time limit with the flexibility of changing it depending on the volume of calls and interest. Is there any further discussion on the matter? Member Bradford, you're recognized.
I just want to understand with the flexibility, we have the ability to go beyond an hour as well.
That was not part of the motion. If that changes the volume of time. So that would be a separate motion.
I just think that's flexibility.
Well, keep in mind that you have an overall volume, so, I mean, that's up to you, if that's what you want to do, but that needs to be clear. So I think it would be better if you want to change the time, like an hour to 2 hours or whatever, you want a separate motion, because there may be a difference of opinion on that.
Deal with the motion that we have on the floor, and then maybe, like we see, we need to make a separate motion to extend the time to do that. Okay, so is there any further discussion on the present motion? Hearing no further discussion, I'll turn to Parliamentarian Johnson for roll call vote.
Yes.
Excuse me, this is AT&T. We're getting a terrible echo from this.
When I speak?
Yes. Can you move the microphone away from the speaker a little bit?
Yes. Is that better?
No, not at all.
Okay, now is that better?
Still getting an echo.
It looks like member Lewis and member, gosh, I don't know their names, next to him.
Okay, is this better?
Still getting an echo.
Okay, I'm sorry. I can't hear anything, so I just want to make sure that the mic is picking it up properly. Okay, then I will proceed with the vote. In the vote for the motion as presented to set the time for the public comment at 3 minutes with the flexibility of increasing or decreasing depending upon the volume of the individual speaking. Chair Moore?
It's 9:14, so at this point, should we limit it to 2 minutes?
Okay, this is just to vote on the motion, and then you can state it.
If you just run the.
Okay, Chair Moore? Chair Moore votes aye.
And then.
Vice Chair Brown? Aye. Vice Chair Brown votes aye.
No whispers to that. It's not no area of stuff.
Member Bradford? Aye. Member Bradford votes aye. Member Grills? Aye. Member Grills votes aye. Member Holder? Aye. Member Holder votes aye. Member Jones Sawyer? Aye. Member Jones Sawyer votes aye. Member Lewis?
Aye.
Member Lewis votes aye. Member Montgomery Stepp?
Aye.
Member Montgomery Stepp votes aye. Member Tamaki? Member Tamaki votes aye. Madam Chair, there are 9 members present and voting. There were 9 ayes and 0 nays.
Thank you, Parliamentarian Johnson. There are 9 ayes and 0 nays. The ayes have it and the motion carries. So we'll start with 3 minutes. Jolene Cook, you may begin.
Good morning. My name is Jolene Cook. I'm sorry if I seem confused, but I have accessibility challenges, and typically I come to the meetings online, but it's been very difficult for me because the platform has changed every single time. So here I am in person. I am I was born and raised in Berkeley, and I have a large family. Sadly, though, there are 3 people who still reside in the city limits of Berkeley who are a part of my family. That's significant because I grew up on the waterfront. The waterfront was the part of Berkeley that was, there was a railroad that was imposed that separated the city of Berkeley from the black side of Berkeley, from the regular side. The railroads have been removed, but the families are missing. Our community has been ripped to shambles, and what was once the most diverse city in the state of California is now the least diverse, which I think is a travesty considering the university regents are one of the largest property owners in the city of Berkeley. So I grew up here on the waterfront. I believed in the American dream. I had folks who came as first generations. I have immigrants in my family, as well as people who invested in our community. This is what we
This is
call
Greg at
home.
AT&T. Can anybody hear me?
My family has been displaced. I myself have
Okay.
experienced
I'm not getting an
homelessness,
echo now. I'm
but I
gonna
went
place you
to
back in
every
the,
school,
okay.
every junior college in my grasp. I got a college education,
I
college
lost you,
degree
the audio. I can no
outside
longer hear you.
of California because they were the only people who would offer someone like me, who looked like me, with no resources, a chance, an opportunity, and an education. Now, I've looked through, I've read through the
This is Greg at
documents,
AT&T. I can't
and
hear anybody anymore.
I do know that the economic consultants
I can hear you
found
now.
that 569 billion would be a cap for California, which
No, I
equates
cannot.
to about $223,000 per person for eligible African Americans who are in California. Now, the home that I grew up on, my grandmother's house, coincidentally went up for sale at $1.4 million. And I tried everything that I could to try and keep that family, that property in our family, tried to hustle ways to keep it. But $1.4 million was out of my grasp, out of my family's reach. My grandmother's house, they bought in 1967 for about $7,500, and that was a livable life.
Excuse me so much. I'm so
What I wanted, the last thing I want to say is I'd like the economic consultants to review their numbers, because what they're telling me is 1/5 of the price of
Okay.
what it costs
So sorry
to
to cut
actually
you off in the
purchase
middle of
something in
your
Berkeley. And I'm
comments.
not a fifth of a person. I'd like them to review their numbers and reconsider all of the assets that California has, including
Can you please,
the university regents.
your time is up, and can you please submit feel free to submit your comments in writing. I'm so sorry to have to cut you off in the middle of your sentence. It's very important. Thank you.
I've been here in confusion, but because I can't even hear what you're saying. There's not even accessibility for people who are hard of hearing to understand what's
Thank you
going
so
on.
much.
I'm going to go back.
The task
But
force
I
will
just
take
want
that.
you to consider that also.
Thank you
for
so
people who
much.
have these.
The task force will. Thank you so much, and thanks for coming out today. Our next commenter, please.
This is AT&T, and we don't hear anything.
To everyone,
Okay.
and Miss Michelle Brown.
Okay, I just unmuted.
My name is Bishop Henry Williams, and I've been working in the community here for 40 years here in Oakland, and I've been working nationally in reparations. For 25 to 30 years, I've passed out
Yeah, there's that.
material to all the black couples, starting coming from Bobby Lee and everything.
So if you were to use your phone,
Reparations, okay? And everybody is most of you now saying that the governor, the presidents, and all the black caucus. Nobody got back with me about anything. We ain't telling that our telephone. No one ever called me or got back with me on anything, okay? I'm a sick man, brother, you know.
Stand by.
I'm going to do the best I can. That's all I can do, okay? And I have many issues with my body, okay? But thank God I'm here today, okay? So I have sickness caused me not to speak any louder. Okay, I won't go through that, but I'm here to say that for many years I've been researching, investigating. I was community work in Oakland for many years with a nonprofit company. Well, Caltrans and the city owed me almost $200,000, and they will not pay me, okay, for working on the 880 Cypress Freeway. I brought people and trained people to work on the 880 Cypress Freeway. We had the earthquake, but my issue I want to get to is Oakland, California. I have all of the proof that the port of Oakland, California is a slave plantation, okay? I know what a slave plantation is. I was born and raised in Alabama, and I know what a slave plantation is, and I know what they do, okay? And right here in Oakland, the railroad companies run the port of Oakland for 40 years. It wasn't the city and the county, it was the railroad companies. And they had a big slave camp up in Oakland Hills, and 1, 2, 3 in West Oakland. Most of West Oakland was slave camp in that time, okay? And so like the slaves cut down over 500,000 redwood trees in the Oakland Hills. There had a lot of slaves up there with no home. And cut down over 500,000 trees. They built homes out of them trees and 5 sawmills around the port of Oakland. The railroad company did. And they built homes in Oakland, Berkeley, Alameda, San Francisco, and San Jose out of them redwood trees. They didn't build their home for a black person, and they didn't give that black person a home here, okay? They lived in tents and on the streets and around, just like a lot of them living today, okay? And it's time for a truth to be told. And I'm an ordained bishop, and also I have an honorary doctorate, okay?
Pastor,
And I
I'm
believe
so
speaking the
sorry
truth.
to cut you off, but your comments are very, very powerful, and the task force appreciates it. And thank you so much for coming, but your time is up. However, feel free to submit any additional comments in writing to the task force. They would love to hear any additional comments that you would have to say. Do you need any assistance? Would you like any further assistance?
I'm sorry, I don't hear too well.
Oh, your time's up. Do you need any additional assistance?
I can say a couple words.
Yeah, time's up.
Your time is up. However, we'd be happy to take your comments in writing and share them with the task force. All right, our next commenter. Thank you so much. Thank you, Pastor.
Good morning. Bishop Williams was expressing his longevity here and the work that he's done, and we all are here to express the same sentiments. My name is Dr. Truth Bey, National Minister of Justice under the New Black Panther Party, under National Chairman Sheikh Imam Akbar, who wished to be here on their behalf. In 1857, Dred Scott stood before Roger Taney. He was just a man with 2 daughters and a wife, and he couldn't understand why he wasn't free. And Roger Taney, who actually had 13 slaves himself, was the Chief Justice at the time, said that you will have a black man who has no rights that a white man will ever respect. Since 1857, that has been law. It has not been written law, but through the 13th Amendment, where it says neither servitude nor involuntary servitude should accept as punishment for a crime whereof shall be duly convicted, and through traffic stops, through mass incarceration, that is how you continue to enslave the black man. So we ask that the anti-black hate crime bill, not a people of color, not an LGBT, no offense, but a black anti-hate crime bill to be drafted in order for us to be protected. Because according to the Constitution currently, it is flawed. It is giving permission for black people to be non-citizens, as it states. So as we continue to increase policy, we ask that it shows in the community equity for black businesses who applied for grants over and over and over again. And no attack, but if you were part of the Mark Ridley Thomas Circle in LA County, which I was born and raised and represent, black women Businesses, nonprofits have been given the shaft for as long as we can remember. And so, no personal attack, as people would say yesterday. But if you know politically that you have not done the job to keep LA constituents that I know a fair chance, then you have no reason to speak. We ask that these laws be implemented on paper and that a bill be drafted in order for us to see the protections that you give Asians, LGBT, Ukrainians, Afghanistans. Housing is a human right. We're going to need you just to cut the check. $1.7 million that we're speaking in LA County, and I'm sure in Oakland, Sacramento, and a lot of Black neighborhoods. Equity is very important. We don't want you to keep thinking and talking and discussing about it. Be about it. And so the reversal of that Dred Scott decision and equity is what we seek. And on behalf of Bishop Henry C. Williams, he deserves his reparations just like many of descendants of slaves. So can we see it and cut the check? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next speaker, please.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Brandy Summers, and I'm an associate professor of geography at UC Berkeley. But I'm here today as a daughter of Oakland, an East Oakland resident and native. To the task force, as you move forward in your assessment and development of reparations proposals, and as your experts continue to gather data, I ask that you consider this city, Oakland, and the greater East Bay, not only as a case, but a model for how place-based injury and the afterlife of slavery has shaped the administration of racist, unequal harm to Black people in this state. My family migrated from Louisiana in the 40s and 50s with the promise of a better life, wages, and conditions away from the institutionalized violence of Jim Crow. Just a few years prior, Black folks came here to work in the shipyards and related industries to help support the war overseas. More than 50,000 Black migrants arrived between 1942 and 1945, most settling in Oakland. Despite valiant contributions, Black folks remained at the bottom of the social and economic hierarchy, left in shipyard ghettos, in inferior living conditions, and on toxic land sites in places like West Oakland and the unincorporated areas of Russell City and North Richmond, which housed Richmond's landfill and was a notorious dumping ground for white residents and regional governments and businesses. If you want to measure economic impact of federal policies and programs like redlining and the war on crime, you can look no further than here, where we stand. But I want you to consider the impact of the war on poverty, urban renewal, or Negro removal in its totality, the end of the welfare state, the privatization of social goods and services, and the 2008 subprime mortgage crisis, which disproportionately impacted Black Californians. I want you to remember the devastating and continuing effects of Prop 13, Prop 209, and even the Penal Code 667, which is also known as the Three Strikes Law. I want you to remember that Oakland's homeless population consistently makes up half of the total of Alameda County, and Black people comprise 70% of those experiencing homelessness, while making up just 20% of the overall population from a high of nearly 50% when I was growing up here. Black and Indigenous people continue to be the only ones whose numbers are shrinking in this city. At the same time, I also want to make clear that every instance of devastating harm impacted or enacted by the government, colluding with racist real estate industry, banks, and developers, there's been powerful resistance by Black people. Just talk to us. Black Oakland has always fought back, and we have sustained wins and losses, from the founding of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters in the 20s and the Black Panther Party in the 60s, to the incubation of prison abolition movements and solidarity with Black Lives Matter. Oakland residents, property owners, and renters regularly expose connections between environmental and employment concerns, as well as alliances with connections around the globe. We haven't yet gotten what we've deserved, but I implore you to consider our place as a model for how state-sanctioned egregious injustices have taken and continue to take our place.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your comments. Next presenter, please.
Good morning. My name is Sharice, and I am the granddaughter of Lula Mae and John Edgar, who left Mississippi for California during the Great Migration so my grandfather wouldn't get lynched. Today, I want to talk about direct cash payments versus policy change. Everything is not going to be quantifiable by a dollar amount, by a dollar value amount, excuse me. Some of what the task force is trying to address can be best addressed by policy change recommendations. Task force, please begin to distinguish which recommendations are policy change appropriate versus which ones are direct cash payment appropriate. I still want my check, but everything that has been discussed the last one and a half years does not require direct cash payment. It will make your task much easier to make the distinction. Secondly, restitution for the discrimination allowed by the state of California. The economists are trying to calculate the value lost to Black homeowners, businesses, etc. Why not calculate the value gained by the state for protecting discrimination? For example, how much tax revenue did the state collect during the time in question from Black residents? Conduct a sample audit of tax returns, pay stubs, etc. during those times. Boom, that's your restitution dollar amount right there. You can't benefit from being a bad actor in protecting discrimination. These restitution funds can be put in a pool for eligible claimants to draw from. And I yield the rest of my time if there's anything available to another speaker. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next speaker, please.
Okay, so yesterday I wasn't able to complete my comments, so I'll restart here. So there are legacy organizations who attack grassroots lineage-based organizers. These people include NARC and COBRA, who slander them as anti-Black or Afrophobic. Some of them even work on the commission to try to encourage legislation that would allow a coup or to oust members who have strong backing of the very organizers whose advocacy pushed the bill through in the first place. The leadership of NARC and COBRA have demonstrated themselves to be hostile agitators who use their decades worth of political affiliations to undermine the reparations movement. Finally, the miscommunication goes all the way to sitting representatives, people like Reggie Jones-Sawyer, who introduced the legislation to have members of the task force removed, to Sheila Jackson-Lee and Barbara Lee, who insist on rejecting the voices of the grassroots to support a bill that essentially builds slush funds for legacy organizations to line their pocket for long-standing studies that promise nothing. The people have told them multiple times that HR 40 is unsatisfactory, and they've responded with what amounts to an oh well. It is not our job to jump behind bad bills. It is quite literally your job to write legislation that fulfills the will of the people. Grassroots organizers have even proposed edits, bills such as HR 1865. I also want to end addressing those who call lineage-based organizers divisive. How much of an ally are you if you require Black Americans to disappear themselves into a flat blackness and constrict them from being able to advocate for the peculiarities of their own predicament? Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Akil Kashif El. I'm gonna pick up where I left off yesterday. The slave is made real and descendable by custom and by act. African Americans are held under these two different constructs that transmute legal properties to human beings that belong to lands. Slavery in the United States serves to cut off routes of escape for African Americans to gain their freedoms through customs. Let's say there were no legal declarations that African Americans was to be called slaves, but it entailed a series of cases followed by legislation that dealt with the practical problems arising from customs held by Europeans holding African as slaves. So I'm gonna just cut that part here and get into what I really want to say. I think the reparations should be as follows. It's to be gifted to us with gold and silver bullion to, as I said before, my antebellum slaves and ancestors and their heirs. It should be measured in the amount of 1 troy ounce of gold and silver per each antebellum slave and their descendants, according to the conditions of the mother for 16 generations. That equals 1,724 metric tons of gold and silver bullion. statehood enclaves settled on 465,121,280 acres of land in the former Confederate South. That's an equitable remedy, and that's what a society would look like to me had not we been enslaved by them. I like to go on more and more, but what I am kind of confused about is this should be on a national level and not a state level. As you know, when California entered into the Union, it was a so-called free state, not a slave state. Got you. So I believe that the correct platform is to be on a national level. You got to get it to that point. We don't want to be paid in fiat notes. We want to be paid in silver and gold bullion. Well, then we can back our own currency and fund our own repair. Contracted with the Federal Reserve Bank, they don't owe us reparations. Private banking housing in Europe. So it's a lot of red tape that goes with that. I do want reparations paid, but not in fiat notes. It definitely needs to be in precious golds, metals, silver, water, scarce resources. We need the ability to develop in enclaves. So I just need you guys to put that on the agenda. And thanks.
Thank you very much. Chair, just a check-in?
Yes. Per the approved motion, I want to check in with my colleagues. Do we want to stay at the 3 minutes, change it to 2 minutes, or 1 minute?
There are about 13 people, it appears, that would like to speak.
I'm just curious, again, can we just expand the time that we have here to maybe an hour and a half for oral comment? So,
Yeah.
Well, we started late.
We can entertain a motion if you like.
What is the scheduled end time for oral communications?
10:15.
10:15.
And there are also folks on the line.
Exactly. I would say at least we should extend it to 10:30.
Okay, so is there a motion? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we extend oral communications to 10:30.
Is there a second? So it has been properly moved by Senator Bradford and properly seconded by Member Holder that we extend the public comment period until 10:30 a.m. Is there any discussion on the matter?
Point of clarification, would that be continuing the 3 minutes or changing it also to two minutes? Just a question.
I still think we maintain the flexibility to go from 3 to 2, so that doesn't change it, so.
Okay, is there any further discussion on the matter? I'm saying we should limit it to 2, but still keep it until 10:30. I think that's a fair compromise.
Well, I'll take that as a friendly amendment, so we'll move it from 2-minute presentations, but extend the time to 10:30.
Any other further discussion on the matter? Hearing no further discussion, I'll turn to Parliamentarian Johnson for a roll call vote.
Thank you, Madam
Okay,
Chair.
may I proceed, please?
Well, we have to vote first. Chair Moore,
Oh, aye, excuse me.
Vice Chair Brown. Aye. Member Bradford. Aye. Member Grills. Aye. Member Holder. Member Holder votes aye. Member Jones Sawyer. Member Jones Sawyer abstains. Member Lewis.
Aye.
Member Lewis votes aye. Member Montgomery Stepp.
Aye.
Member Montgomery Stepp votes aye. Member Tamaki.
Aye.
Member Tamaki votes aye. Madam Chair, there were 9 members present and voting. There were 8 yes votes and 1 abstention.
Thank you. There are 8 yes votes, 1 extension. The motion carries as the ayes have it. So public comment period has been extended until 10:30. Each person has 2 minutes to speak. Aisha Martin Walton.
Yes. Next speaker, please.
Okay, thank you so very much.
Sir, you can speak.
Okay, thank you so very much. First of all, I'd like to praise God and thank God for being here. And like I said yesterday, America owes us the whole goddamn country. And I'm standing on that. And I'd also like to say that no one in America is making an honest day's living. So if you thought or you was under the impression that you got up this morning and that you was going to make an honest day's living, you deceived yourself. Did you hear what I said? Because the only way you can make an honest day's living here in America is doing the will of God. And that's a fact. Now, we've been born in sin and shaped in iniquity here in America, and we follow people that was already in rebellion to God based on what they did to us and what they are still doing. And we believe that there is no doubt that there is a meticidal conspiracy, which is systematically and intentionally undermining and distracting these people's conscious beliefs for the purpose of instilling doubt in their mind. And once the doubt is instilled in their mind, they replace it with what is called immocal. And this is mental and physical torture through whitewashing tactics, where they tactically maneuver us in a position to suppress us, oppress us, compress us, and depress us. And now we stressed out based on these conditions. So we're asking that you give us reparations because America is number one on God's list to be destroyed. So if you don't accommodate us and you don't assist us, just watch what our God is going to do to America for what she has done to us and still doing in a conspiracy right to this very hour against us. One white American woke up and said, we conspire to destroy black people each and every day. And the whole system is based on destroying us. There is no doubt.
Thank you. Thank you for coming to the mic. Next speaker, please.
At this moment, I would like to take a brief pause to recognize Oakland Councilwoman Travia Reed again. Thank you again for your presence. Thank you for your support as well. I can't see. And also Council Member either Ron Davis?
Lauren Taylor.
Oh, Lauren Taylor. Thank you all so much for providing this space and for your support and your invaluable service to the city of Oakland.
Go ahead, please. Thank you.
Good morning. You can't see her, but this is for the baby in the back, asleep, and who I assume is her daddy's arms. My name is Kayesha Nzewi, and I'm the head woman in charge of Black Californians United for Early Care and Education. We were just established this year as a result of historically deficit-minded policies. The early childhood education system is steeped in anti-Black beliefs and practices, thus reproducing racialized harm even in new policies and programs, i.e. TK. We aim to ensure California's ECE system is culturally affirming for Black children, Black families, and Black educators, and that ECE policies and resource allocation align to match such vision. Now, the full interim report, as comprehensive as it is, does not explicitly call out the distinct experiences of anti-Blackness for our youngest Black children, our babies, our infants, our toddlers, our preschoolers, Black families, and Black child care providers in California's ECE system. Black Californians United for Early Care and Education has a 10-point plan that uplifts the necessity and demand for a specific and tailored approach to fully invest in the Black whole child, whole family, whole ECE workforce, and whole community approach. California's early education system is at a critical inflection point that is on the brink of further oppression of Black children, families, and child care providers. And given the historical context of Black women being the nation's first caregivers, it is imperative that the task force includes recommendations that elevates the child care and early education system. Black ECE will be formally submitting a letter to the Reparations Task Force to consider adding early education into the California Reparations Report. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next speaker.
Good morning to everyone who chose to come out this morning. My name is Moria McIntosh. I want to give a shout out to my best friend, Raquel Finley. She's in Texas, working with the Freedom Code Task Force out there. on reparations. I just want to read a piece from that they posted online about the racial terror before I speak. It said, nationally, after slavery, white Americans frequently aided by the government maintained the badges of slavery by carrying out violence and intimidating against African Americans for decades. Racial terror pervaded every aspect of post-slavery Black life and prevented African Americans from building the same wealth and political influence as white Americans. Just that alone is the reason why we need our reparations and the check cut to us alone. There's no way in this world that we would have been able to compete with anyone with a complexion lighter than ours, just based on the 400 years alone that they continuously undermined our culture. They stripped us from everything that we had. I don't even have my own last name. I can't even walk down the street without being judged. I can't fill out a job application without being judged. There's nothing I can do in this world without being judged. I just got back from Europe. They judged me. I deserve a fighting chance just like any other race in this world. Why should I be judged everywhere I go because of the color of my skin? All I did was wake up and be born into this world. It's the hardest thing to do in this world is wake up and be a Black man, but you'll never know unless you walk in these shoes.
Thank you so much, sir. Just to check in, Chair Moore, it's about 9:50, so we can proceed with a few more.
Proceed with in-person until like 10 minutes or so. We'll have a check-in in 10 more minutes.
Go ahead, Pastor. You have 2 minutes to speak. Thank you so much for coming.
I think one of the things, I'm having trouble hearing you because of the masks, but God bless you. First of all, I want to thank this group, this August group that has been selected for this work. This is a serious work, and you're all very serious people, each and every member. And I really appreciate you. I think that we need to respect each other. We suffer from loss of love and respect now. And I've known some of you for a while. Thank you, Madam Chairperson, for your hard work. Vice Chair, Amos Brown, one of the real people that have been in this fight for many, many years here. And I've known him well, have had the times when I've been able to work alongside him. He's a great man. Reggie Jones Sawyer, Assemblyman Reggie Jones Sawyer. A lot of people don't know he's one of the people, along with Senator Steve Bradford, that made possible the payout of the first reparations for the Bruce Beach family, which we were all in together. For reparations. Repair. And that isn't enough. But those two gentlemen up there did a lot of work, Steve Bradford and Reggie Jones Sawyer, to make sure that that happened. And it wasn't easy. I was involved in that fight. By the way, I'm Reverend Tony Pierce. I'm the CEO of Black Wall Street Project. And we go all over the world fighting for people's rights. I want to read something that I think may be able to help the committee in their work.
I'm so deeply sorry, but your time is up. However, your points that you have written down, the task force will receive them if you submit them to reparationstaskforce@dlj.ca.gov.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to help you do that.
Okay.
And,
I'm ready to go.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm ready to go. But I just said this. I didn't say what I was saying. I was speaking about this great committee and your work. Can I just have 1 second more? Thank you.
Thank you. So here's some key things that I'm going to submit. I'm not going to even read them. I will submit these things online that I think might help the committee.
However, we have a lot of people who also have important things to say.
All over the world.
Thank you
They
so much.
need to be heard.
Everybody. Thanks
God
for.
bless.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out.
And $223,000 is not enough.
Next speaker.
It's not enough.
Sir, you can approach the mic, please. Go ahead and approach the mic. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for respecting the 2 minutes. Sir, you may begin.
Hi, I'm Ted Frazier. I also want to thank the committee for taking on this awesome responsibility that you have. I just have to say that my first response was, oh no, here we go again. I hope that it doesn't, the committee doesn't become like the infamous bridge to nowhere. A lot of times they refer things to committee and then you never hear from it. But I think we have enough responsible people on this committee to really take a serious look at the situation and come up with some results. Black churches, nonprofit organizations, specific names of Black people who have contributed to California culture should be integrated into the background section of the report, including the contributions of Secretary of State Shirley Weber, Congressman and Mayor of Oakland, Ron Dellums, Speaker, Mayor of San Francisco, Willie Brown, Tom Bradley of Los Angeles, Congresswoman Yvonne Burke, Doris Davis, Eddie Maddox, Wiley W. Emanuel, Dr. Robert Foster, Robert Drake, Bishop H.H. Brookins, Congressman Julian Dixon, William Nixon Jr., Paul Williams, Dr. Cloud Huston.
Excuse me, sir. I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I am in the middle of your sentence. Thank you so much. However, know that your comments will be recorded. They will be written into the record of the minutes. And if you have additional comments, feel free to submit them to the Reparations Task Force email address.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out. Thank you again for respecting the 2-minute period. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Pastor. Please proceed.
Peace and blessings to everyone in this room that are here for the honest work of getting reparations to the Black and Indigenous people of this land. I come from 3 generations of people that served this country, and their descendants built this country. And so every camera in this room is here because of the buzz of getting the paltry and measly $200,000 or some such for housing discrimination. So I'm going to talk about housing discrimination. Again, 3 generations. My great-grandfather served World War I. My grandfather served in World War II and in Korea. My father served in Vietnam. None of them got any GI Bill, real or imagined. And so we're going to talk about housing discrimination. I bought a home in 2006 and was part of the greatest transfer of wealth out of our community ever. And in 2013, only 4 Black homes got loans from the major banks. So let's talk about housing discrimination. $200,000 is nothing for what my family has contributed to this country. We built this country, we serve this country honorably. We need reparations.
Thank you so much. Next speaker, you're on.
I got 2 or 3 minutes. Can I make it?
You have 2.
You
You have two.
I had 3 yesterday.
Two.
Okay, well,
Let's start.
Okay, look, I came a long way from LA. To me, I'm gonna just tell you, transparency is the key. We need to communicate. That's gonna be the key to us black people. I stay at the Marriott. I saw the gentleman this morning, and people walking past me don't even know we having a meeting right here. There's something wrong with that panel. Everybody praising you. I had a problem here. I have a motion to pass today. Yesterday when I spoke, look over my minutes. I'm gonna speak loud so everybody can hear. We got problems with people in the back. This is not a circus. We come here like in college. We got all you guys respecting. We went to college. We from ground zero. Your job is to hear us. We want transparency. First thing I said yesterday was the dead people in front of us. And we say from my neighborhood, the dead homies. They will be respected to get reparations as well, to pass out to the people. I did not see that on you guys' readings. And as well, 1977 is a disgrace. I told you yesterday about 84, the incident with Oliver North and Ricky Ross. I bought those from him. I did my time to society. Okay. Ronald Reagan never did his. Bush never did his. So we're affected. 77 is not the year. The year should be present. Okay? Next thing, I need to know, 1 minute left. Thank you, sister. I need to know a lot. I want your number, brother. I love your information. You on fire, but I need you to speak up and let us know what you really said because it's real powerful. You, my sister, you need to speak up too, and all this, how much else you heard. I'm sorry, I've just been here a minute, but I'll let you know. We need to hear you back here. We sat in the back yesterday, and we had to, what did she say? Transparency. We need to hear everything you say. This is very important to us. Not just for us, for our dead people, for us and the ones that come later. When it's going to the government, we want everything. We want schooling because you chose us to go to school. We want medical for the Tuskegee Institute trying to genocide. We don't even want to pay taxes just like Indians. Well, not Indians, the natives. Indians. So this is where we are right now. So this is the start of ground. One more minute. This is the ground zero. This is the ground. Hey, God bless y'all. Appreciate y'all. I just want to know. I need most.
Thank you.
That's it from 77 to present. Anybody?
Thank you.
Can we go?
I need the next.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
All right. Next, we need. Thank you. Next speaker. All right. Thank you so much. Thanks for respecting the 2-minute time frame. You may proceed. Just speak loudly.
In 1937, the Homeowners Loan Corporation made a redlining map to determine who would receive home loans and general housing investments in the Bayview-Hunters Point area. Bayview-Hunters Point received the lowest score. Blacks were pushed into the Bayview district from redlining ushered in from Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, and Arkansas, and the major growth was between 1940 and 1970. The shipyard was purchased at Hunters Point in 1940 by the San Francisco Naval Shipyard, was purchased in Hunters Point by the U.S. Navy. And that's where the USS Missouri battleship was. In 1950, same neighborhood, Operation Sea Spray. In 1950, where the U.S. Navy secret biological warfare experiments was the Cernetta marcosian and Bacillus globi bacteria was sprayed over the San Francisco neighborhood. That is genocide. Medical apartheid. Naval Radiation Defense Laboratory established in Bayview. The Naval Radiation Defense Laboratory was a military lab created to study the effects of radiation and nuclear weapons. Military scientists experimented with the disposal of nuclear material without concerns for their close proximity to the major metropolitan area. This was in the Bayview-Hunters Point area. The Environmental Declared Era Superfund. The Environmental Protection Agency declared Hunters Point Shipyard one of the top 10 most polluted federal properties in the United States of America, and that wasn't even recognized until the year 2000. My grandmother died of cancer at 49 years old in 1979. My other grandmother died of cancer in 1986. My aunt died of cancer in 1992. My mother died of cancer in 2008. My cousin Isis, who is my aunt Valerie, who died of cancer in 1999, died of breast cancer at the age of 47 years old.
I'm so
We
sorry.
are all from Bayview, Hunts Point area.
Your time is up, but thank you so much. Please continue and feel free to
We need
submit your
real people on this
comments.
panel who are from America, who are Black Americans. Because we feel the pain of what happens and we really know.
Thank you so much for your comments.
What it's done to our communities.
Thank you. Next speaker, you have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm here representing not only the God Reparations group from yesterday, but also HR 2998, which is about COINTELPRO. I wanted to hope that with the information we'll provide, since the information we've been sending, these chairs be represented with some of the people that supported our God Reparations group. Mutulu Shakur is a man that will is released this
I need
week.
the staff to step out because it's carrying noise and it's getting a bit distracting for me. I cannot hear public comment with staff on the phone. So if you can step out, please proceed.
Should I move away from the microphone? Oh, okay. Mutulu Shakur is released next week. Most people know of him as Tupac's stepdad. Mutulu Shakur is one of our elders because the seats we want to occupy here in our hearings believes that there was a movement. We became on the map as California because something that went down in this city. I also want to mention that not only is Mutulu being freed, who stopped drugs to happen in Black communities through acupuncture, Kazi Toure, at 15, joined the Black Panthers and went to Langley College, which is right over here. And he became an elder with the National Black Radical Congress, which convened this year, which we're a part of, supported this. Also, Frederica Newton, her office is right through these doors, and she hasn't been sitting in these chairs. Her husband started something called the Black Panther Party. She's right here. I'm asking that these chairs be filled by my mentors. I ask that you also remember 5 streets from here. There was a program that went from Oakland to California to the United States and then the world. It's called the Breakfast Program. Why are those elders, because they're not dead, not in these seats? We want to hear from them. We want to see them. They have the knowledge, what is a political analysis.
Thank you so much for coming forward.
God Reparations.
Thank you.
Okay,
Before the next speaker, Chair, I need to do a check-in. It is 10:05 and.
Can you explain, Michael Newman, what's going on with the phone lines right now?
I don't know. Is this working? Yeah, it is. Improvement over yesterday. We are having an issue where the phone lines on the back end, on the phone operators end doesn't seem to be processing the information into the Zoom. So I have the phone line set up here on this phone. And if you want to take public comment from the people on the phone, we don't know how many people are on it. We have, there is an operator who's ready to let people in by line. So we can shift over to the phones to allow the people on the phone line to be heard. I don't know if you want to do that at some point. We have people in line, but we do have people on the phones, and I wanted to make sure you understood the situation.
Thanks. So it's 10:06. We voted to extend public comment until 10:30. Want to check in with the task force members in terms of, you all have any thoughts around how we should move forward? Knowing that the traditional phone lines aren't working, should we take phone calls? If so, we're going to have to do it kind of manually, as he was suggesting. There's also still a lot of people who are in the line. So any thoughts? Member Holder, you recognize.
Speak into the mic, please.
Up with the people online and prioritize them. And then in here, in line, on the line, right here.
and prioritize them, and then let's check in again and see whether there's improvement with the phone lines. That's my suggestion.
So we'll go with that. So we'll continue with the in-person public comment. Thank you.
Next public commenter, and again, thank you everyone for respecting the 2-minute time frame.
Hi, I'm Shamila McLean. I'm going to try to be brief. I'm a former special education teacher out of the Bay Area here. And as a special education teacher, I was listening to a very controversial person by the name of Dr. Umar. You guys heard him, right? Dr. Umar Johnson. He's very controversial. A lot of people don't like him. But I was introduced to him because I'm a special education teacher, and he was a psychologist for special education. And what he has mentioned about reparations recently is the word perpetuity. If we know that, it means something that's lasting forever, right? And as Americans, as America lasted and has been funded by slavery for perpetuity, basically, and to give us one check and not to have all those insurance companies and all those agencies that's been benefiting from slavery for the rest of for the entire lifetime of America, and to say that we get one check but not being like investors, our shareholders in those other companies, is kind of wrong. In your 400-page report that you wrote, that word is not mentioned once. So I'm hoping that you guys look into perpetuity and how America has been benefiting from slavery for its conception, and how we can benefit from America being alive until it's over. Because as Black people, we deserve that. And I have so much more. I sent some emails to your task force with other ideas and other things that I have to say, but 3 minutes, 2 minutes, I can't do that, right? So hopefully you guys are checking your emails about that and what Black people are actually saying. But please include the word perpetuity into your report and how we can benefit as America is benefiting from slavery and from what our ancestors did that we never got paid for. And I hope that you guys sue every other country that has benefited from slavery as well, not just this country. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you so much for those comments this morning. Next speaker, please.
Good morning, Chair Moore and members of the Reparations Task Force. My name is Tamara Raspberry, and I am principal for Skyline Advocacy and a member of the Black Leadership Council, who I'm speaking for today. The Black Leadership Council is a group of California leaders from varied sectors across the state that seek to improve the conditions of Black communities across 4 key areas: health, wealth, housing, and education. And we are extremely grateful for your work. We are doing this through our Black Prosperity Agenda that includes an examination and application of Black Power Building. The urgency of the topics you have addressed throughout this process do not have simple solutions, and we appreciate the range of expert testimony that has been included. In regard to today's topics, Black Americans are incarcerated in state prisons at nearly 5 times the rate of white Americans. More than 122,000 California residents are locked up at state prisons, leaving the state with an imprisonment rate of 310 for every 100,000 California residents. So you have 1 minute, so I will move over. The United States spends $182 billion per year on mass incarceration, a system that harms millions and fails to make communities safer. This includes 3,000 jails and 1,900 state and federal prisons that cost taxpayers $85 billion per year. Mass incarceration devastates entire communities. It worsens overall health outcomes and exacerbates economic inequality. With only 6.5% of Californians identifying as Black or African American, we account for nearly 40% of the state's homeless. We need to continue to decriminalize low-level drug offenses, arrest fewer people, end money bail, and reform sentencing practices, and better invest in low-income communities. Thank you for your time today and your critical work. The Black Leadership Council looks forward to being a thought partner and uplifting the community. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Next speaker, 2 minutes, please.
Good morning. My name is Icy Williams. I stand before you to contribute to the efforts of this task force with reparations proposed as follows. The California Department of Fair Employment and Housing, DFEH, denies Black Californians a fair administrative process. African Americans are the only unprotected class in the so-called protected classification. The leadership and key staff at DFEH
need to be replaced with individuals who will enforce civil rights laws fair and equitable for all California residents. Reparations should include both legal and anonymity protections for African Americans who file discrimination lawsuits against violating employers in the state of California. All expired right to sue notices issued by DFEH over the last unspecified decades should be reinstated as a reparation for African Americans. Going forward, right to sue notices should never expire when African Americans file legitimate discrimination complaints. Black Californians harmed by discrimination should be allowed to file complaints with both the Department of Fair Employment and Housing and the EEOC without restrictions. Next, the California Department of Labor also does not pursue claims filed by African Americans. As a reparation, I propose that claims filed by African Americans that remain unsettled by the Department of Labor be issued monetary fines in addition to unpaid claims for employer labor code violations. The Department of Fair Employment and Housing and Department of Labor need accountability and independent oversight. There should be neutral overseers to perform audits and regular reviews of these state departments to ensure diversity, equity, and inclusion for African Americans. Next, the University of California, UC system, is one of the most anti-Black employers in the state of California. As a reparation, I propose the UC system be held accountable and fines imposed for each discriminatory act to remedy the harms against Black employees along with job reinstatements.
I'm so sorry, your time is up.
California, you promised me yesterday, you told me to come back today.
And we're so glad you're
Finally, the California State Bar Association's mission is to protect the public.
Thank you. Your time is up. We have to proceed to our next speaker. Thank you. You can submit your comments to our email.
Yes, and we're glad you did.
And
however, feel free to submit the rest of your comments in writing. If they will go to, I'm sorry, we have a lot of people here with 2 minutes. Next speaker, please. No, I'm so sorry. We need to have the next speaker. It's just not fair to everyone here. The other people. Come on, next speaker, please. I'm so sorry. Next speaker, I'm so sorry. I'd be happy to help you submit it in writing. Next speaker, please. Can you please remove from the, yes.
Interrupted.
Excuse me, ma'am, we have to move on. You can submit your comments online or via our phone and at our next hearing as well. You got your opportunity.
I did
Thank
that.
you so much, ma'am. I really
I'm just
appreciate
about
it.
done. On the highest level, the state of California operates with African Americans. Employment is livelihood. When African Americans are employed, we're often harassed on the job and treated differently.
Excuse me, madam. It's finished. Your time is up. Your time is up. Please, please, please. Give it to the clerk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your attention and time. I appreciate it. I don't want to squander it. First and foremost, I think that we need to define lineage. Lineage deals with hereditary backing or blood right, but also deals with institutional custom and trade and commerce. It's lineage based too. We don't have a way to do business in commerce. So I'm presenting to you an opportunity and promoting that we make Oakland the grassroots, since California is going to lead the way, a grassroots foundation that we can do a repository so we can collect the finances for all these so-called Black people who don't have national interest in banking. Now, under that, you'll put the gold in or the silver in the account, because this is $1, but it's $40 if you're spending private commercial paper. So we put it in a depository and we can turn over some dividends and diversify the portfolio into the stock of the state so everybody can be indentured and entitled to indemnify themselves to security. We can do that, and then when we have children, it'll still be turning over interest from the collateral that we're using as silver and gold. It's simple. And so this is a proposal. It's here, and it'll be before the chair. Happy holidays, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Before the next speaker speaks, I would like to recognize two additional elected officials, City of Richmond Council Member Demilius Johnson and City of Emeryville Council Member Kalima Preforce. Thank you all for attending and thank you for your support and invaluable service to Richmond and Emeryville.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate y'all for letting us speak. My name is Fanchen Mosley. I'm from Los Angeles. I travel here to be a part of this task force meeting to speak. I'm a Black American. I'm a millennial, so I was born in the crack epidemic era, war on drugs, the crime bill, establishments, all that. So I live the life of these things that made the Black community crumble even more. Like I said, I'm a Black American. I can trace my lineage past the 1865 census, like many of Black Americans can if they do their research of their lineage. I got this book at the last Reparations Task Force in Los Angeles, and I want to give y'all a grade overall. I appreciate the statistics. It's me. It's what's happened in my life. It's what happened in most Black Americans' lives. I appreciate y'all efforts in putting that in there. Also, you know, I have to say on one hand, it's showing, you know, delineation to my people because that's the only people that it happened to. So I want you guys to keep that in consideration that it is for Black Americans, these things that happen. We can't be compared to anybody else. I noticed in the book you guys compare us to other persons of color, and it's no comparison. We are the blood here. We are the people that came from this land, and some people did come from Africa. So I would like y'all also to consider that people were enslaved here that were of indigenous blood, that are Black Americans, that were reclassified. And if y'all can add that into y'all report, because it's not just Africans. And I don't want it to be muddy. I don't want the waters to be muddy about the reparations and what it's for. And I know it's not just for slavery as well. Like we were talking about housing discrimination. We are like in this book, you guys tell us like we are 53% of Black families are homeless.
I'm sorry, your time is up, but thank you so much for coming all the way from Los Angeles to San Francisco and representing.
Good morning, Task Force. My name is Carolyn Johnson Essex. I am from Long Beach, California. And I didn't get, I wasn't able to, can you hear me? I wasn't able to say everything last time, but I just want to say I stand before this body to encourage everyone to stay strong and united. We are in the fight of our life, but when haven't we been? The history of slavery in America is actually worse than what most of us know. So do not let anyone marginalize the absolute heinous and violent behavior applied to Black folks, Black Americans, and especially Black men. They will say it wasn't that bad. They will say it was long ago, but the Library of Congress is full of documentation. Historians, white and Black, have researched and documented everything. The lynchings and dragging by horses and trucks, the burning of whole towns consisting of our ancestors, our people, not the ones that did it to us. It was our people that it was done to. And so they had zero remorse. Although we are all traumatized to this day, stay strong. Know who you are and whose you are. And at the end of the day, any amount is too little and every amount is never enough. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming out today. Next speaker, 2 minutes, please.
Righteous morning. How everybody doing?
Wow, so I'm in California. I was listening to Tony Tone song, It Never Rains in Southern California. And I'm in Northern California. It's a little cold, so I had to wear my ski mask and my coat. But, I've been looking at the research that you all have been doing in California, and I traveled thousands of miles away from Philadelphia to come out here to, first off, say thank you for the amazing work that you all are doing. It's a blessing to see something like this firsthand. And second of all, I looked at some of the reports that you all put out in regards to developments of these Black American officers of affairs or these Freedmen Affairs officers. And I think that idea is something that is not only genius, but it's transformative to something, we can take on that Freedmen Affairs, Black American Affairs agenda around the nation. I heard Thomas Kramer say yesterday, you all are the experts, and it's a political thing that has to happen, right? So when I heard that, my brain clicks and it makes me think, well, we have to lobby, we have to organize, us being reparationists. My name is Khalif the Reparations, by the way. But with that being said, the great suggestions that you all have laid out, it has inspired me, it has inspired others to continue doing this work wherever we may be, and always look at California as ground zero for the amazing work for the advancement of Black Americans here in this country. So, shout out to you all, and thank you for the amazing work.
Thank you. Thanks for coming traveling so far. Next speaker, 2 minutes, please.
I'm sorry, I had to bring my baby. My name is Brent Turner. I'm a resident of Oakland. I was born here. My parents were born here. Before then, my grandparents, they were in San Francisco, and they were from the South. But I want to thank you all, the whole task force, for actually putting all this together. It's well needed. I want to thank the good Dr. Reverend Amos Brown for participating in the Reparations Task Force that the Black and Jewish Unity Coalition put together, which I'm an active member. So I want to start this off by, a few days ago, I heard a speech by President JFK where he said, we preach freedom around the world and we mean it, and we cherish our freedom here at home. But are we here to say to the world, and much more importantly to each other, that this is the land of the free, except for the Blacks? That we have no second-class citizens except for Blacks? That we have no class or caste system, no ghettos, no master race, except for respect for the Blacks? Now the time has come for the nation to fulfill its promise. We were brought here as tools, as a mule to fuel the economy. And since we're no longer that tool, we were casted aside to die. But surprisingly, we've been surviving. I know you guys have your recommendations in order. I haven't had a chance to fully read the 500 pages. But what we do need, from my experience of living, being Black my whole life, and getting out into the real world, we need a state-funded bank that will provide us interest-free loans for housing and for businesses. We need community wellness centers that would keep us alive and surviving, because I know my grandmother passed away early. She shouldn't have died that early because she couldn't afford good health care. We need free state colleges. The state is already doing that now. And maybe it's a little far-fetched, but maybe we shouldn't have to pay state taxes for a while too. You all are aware of the income gaps, and they're going to continue to rise.
Sir, I'm so sorry. Your time is up.
Okay.
However,
I just want to thank you all for that. And like I said, Martin Luther King said 60 years ago, we shall overcome. And it seems like we, 60 years later, hoping that we're going to overcome.
Thank you.
And let's not make this a paralysis
Thanks.
or analysis.
Thank you. All right, next speaker.
Good morning. Thank you, Task Force, for organizing this important discussion. My name is Daniel Landry. I'm a member of the African American Task Force in San Francisco, along with my colleague, Dr. Amos Brown. Thank you for all your work. And I've been watching from a distance, but I thought it'd make sense to come here in person to just tell you we're in solidarity with this body and every other body that's seeking reparations here in the state of California. I will say, being from Mississippi and living in San Francisco all my life, I don't have to bore you with the city of sin, San Francisco. We know that no city can compare on what Black people have went through in San Francisco as well as Mississippi. But today I just want to do, and I'm going to be quiet because I see the line. I know we only have a few short minutes. One thing that the sister was saying about like Bayview Hunters Point Shipyard, and I sat on the Restoration Advisory Board in 2008. When we seek justice in this country, usually it's our own people we have to fight first. And if we can get beyond them, others start to come along and support us. So I just want everyone to please be patient with each other, because this is a process, as Forte said, we're making, well, he said a gangster gumbo, but this is a process that we all have to accept that's not going to be easy. So thank you very much. And we're here in solidarity too with CJ, and we're in support and solidarity of the work that they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair Moore, is that 3 minutes?
Yeah, apologies to those on the phone lines. AT&T wasn't able to correct the issue. We do have a hard cutoff at 10:30. I'm happy to, check in with my colleagues, but for flexibility purposes, if we can just do 1 minute. But I mean, this is a good time. Do we want to have a hard cutoff for 10:30? Okay, we have a hard cutoff at 10:30, so we're probably only going to have time for like 3 more speakers. So you can proceed.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Jayla Williams, and I'm currently 21 years old. Today, I'm here to speak on behalf of the youth. And coming from a society where it limits our control, with these reparations, it can give us a sense of control. And with this control, we can benefit not only ourselves, but everybody else. It doesn't matter what your skin color is. And we all know Black people are not violent. We just are put in situations where they do things where it upsets us. And I'm a person of solutions, so here are my solutions with this reparations. For one, we can open up mental health facilities because we all know it's a serious issue in our community. We can also open up education systems to get children excited about learning, so we can have future doctors, future mechanics, everybody. So please take it into consideration to give us reparations, because it can not only benefit us, but everybody else as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming up.
Thank you, and that was my baby girl. Hi, I'm Pamela Williams, and I'm from Elk Grove, California. I was born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee, and I came here to California in 1985. My grandmother's mother was a product of slavery, and when she was a toddler, they were freed. At that time, they had no housing. And from what I understand, they had to live in boxcars, which are trains. And from there, they went on to live they hopped around on reservations. So I understand perfectly clear. I consider myself a foundational Black American. But also, too, I've been here since 1985, and it's my understanding that you have established a time frame for lineage, maybe cutting off at 77, 79, and that possibly will eliminate me. So my 2 things I have to say: the reparation should be tax-free, so that when we get the monies, the IRS won't come after us and take a big chunk of it. Second, I'm pleading and I'm asking that when you make the decision of the lineage base, that you please at least say from those who've been in California since 2000, please, because we've been here, but I've got children, I've got grandchildren, grown grandchildren. So I'm just asking, I thank you so much. God bless you. I appreciate this task force. And also remember, when everyone in this room has transitioned over, all of your names will be in the history books when we're dead and gone. So I'm asking you to please push the envelope for us, because the housing,
Thank you so much for your comments. Thanks for coming out. This will be our last speaker of the day. Sir, you are our last speaker of the day.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. All these beautiful faces. My name is Paul Williams. I'm from Oakland, California, born and raised, registered nurse practitioner. My great-great-great-great-grandfather, Henry Burrell, died in the Civil War. He had 4 children, small children. And I found that information out. It was so powerful to me. It was so effective in my mind, and for me to tell my children. And now we know we have this information. And I know that he fought for this with his whole heart, soul, spirit, and his body, and he was the ultimate sacrifice, as many Americans, African Americans, Black Americans have been. With that being said, there's something quick I want to say. A harsh, separated life of a chattel slave with his mother living very, very far away. No peace or freedom living with Colonel Lloyd, violence on adults, girls, and boys. Finally being able to be free living with the Augs. It felt like freedom, but not at all. He was a slave in those days because he was Black, but accepting his condition made him a slave in fact. Abolition, reparations was a word with no offense, but to slaveholders, it made no sense. Frederick realized he was never going to be free as a slave, so his only chance for freedom was to run away. Mr. Covey beat him. He never gave him chances. He was so cold-hearted, mean and truly scandalous, but finally beating Mr. Covey woke up his senses. This Black slave was truly strengthened. Gaining his master's trust was truly his chance. Sneaking away to have life on free land, being married to Anna, his wife, by James W.C. Pennington, a man who was white. His last name was Bailey, name of pain. Now it's Douglas. It reigns much fame. That's something that I created in the past, and for me, that's been powerful. Reparations is not offensive. It's simply the solution to right a wrong, to be made whole. And everyone here, I thank you. Thank you for your time. I thank you for your efforts. I thank you for the task force. Everyone, from my brother Josiah Williams back there to everyone else, everyone, I love you here. I appreciate it. Love is the answer. Let's love each other. Let's treat each other right. We're Californians. We need to do this. This is necessary. Reparations now. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. What a powerful way to end public comments today. It's been powerful. Thank you for everyone who has come out. We now have to move on. Chair Moore, task force members.
Chairman Moore.
I
just want to say enforcement. Everything I want is in the report, but laws to enforce it. Enforce what you put out. Enforce what you put out.
Thank you. All right, so we're now moving on to, thank you all members of the public. Thank you.
I'm just the last person. Can I speak, please?
Oh, we can't. We have to move on.
All
right, so we are going to agenda items number
Madam
11
Chairman,
and
can I
12.
speak? I'm the last person, please.
No, because there were people ahead of you that
I didn't get a chance to speak yesterday, and people.
you can turn in your comments via email, hotline. You can also speak to me on the side during the break, and you can participate in public comment at the January meeting as well. Thank you. We're behind. So now we are, as agenda items 11 and 12 from yesterday's agenda were tabled. Before we move forward with today's agenda, if there is no objection, we will remove the two items that were tabled from yesterday's agenda and proceed with them before continuing with today's agenda. Is there any objection to that? Hearing no objection, I will move to agenda item number 11, discussion and potential action items on advisory committee's preliminary recommendations on educating the public and formal apologies. Member Tamaki, you're recognized.
Thank you. I know it's difficult. The chair is doing a very difficult job of balancing public comment and what we have to get to actually get to the June 2023 recommendations. The amount that we have to cover is overwhelming. I'm told we're already an hour behind in the agenda. So I'm going to race through these slides in deference of the need to get us through this. But I regret that we don't have enough to get every speaker. But I also want to support the chair in moving the agenda along, or otherwise we cannot do our job to get what we need to be done by June 2023. So if I could have the first PowerPoint up, and I'll go through this. I'm not seeing it on my screen. It's not on my screen. All right. I'm just going to have to crane my neck and do it like this. So next slide, please. Thank you. Next slide, please.
You should have a home and take a nap in.
All right. So AB 3121 requires us to recommend appropriate ways to educate the California public. That is a requirement of the legislation, and we have to make these recommendations by June 2023. So those are the task force's findings, the interim report, and the final report. Next slide, please. The purpose of that requirement is as follows: to educate the California public of the harm of slavery, the forms of racial oppression and exclusion that followed, and the resulting cumulative, compounding, and cascading consequences that persist today, many of which we've heard from public comment. To increase the understanding and support for future legislative actions implemented by the task force's recommendations. Basically, that means we need to move the needle of public opinion to create the political will to get this done. And ultimately, moving the needle of public opinion involves developing allies within and outside the African American community. We need the ability to not only advance the rationale and the narrative behind reparations and why it's necessary, we also need to defend the program against the attacks that are likely to come, that are actually coming out. We've seen it already in the right-wing media. And that's why the public education component and the communications consultant is so critical at this stage. We also need to basically translate the issue into one of simple justice. It's not only a matter of reparations, direct reparations to the injured and people who suffered directly, but also to translate this into a justice issue for the entire country. So again, next slide, please. Part of the communications committee and the public education committee overlaps. Shauna Charles is going to be working on some things that will be started now, but need to continue after the task force ends, which is June of 2023. So following the end of the task force, the legislature, we would recommend certain things in connection with public education. I'll propose those today. And Shauna Charles mentioned, in terms of that public education, she listed a number of targeted communities that includes the faith community, labor, grassroots organizations, civil rights organizations, I would say professional associations, teachers unions, the Association of Psychologists that Member Grills deals with, every kind of big and small organizations we need to basically penetrate with our message. Next slide, please. We need to recommend the state agency that will oversee the public education process after the task force ends. So in June of 2023, we go out of business. So the question is, how do we advance this, knowing that the passage of reparations bill is going to be a fight that will continue long beyond the sunset of the task force. So we are proposing a newly created agency, and it could be within the California Department of Education or the State Board of Education or other relevant agencies, but some sort of oversight process. And what would that public education look like? Well, here's just one example. The interim report becomes the final report. It incorporates not only what we've already written, but also forms of repair that are to be made. Among other things, we need to get hard copies of that report out. It's too hard for people to try to access it online. I'd say this because I think that the interim report is probably the most significant government report since 1968 Kerner Commission report over 50 years ago, which was largely ignored when that came out. It came out at the heels of the protests and the violence erupting in Detroit and Newark in particular. It laid out basically what had to be done. It was largely ignored to the country's consequence and to the exponential damage, I think, that of the harm to the Black community because those issues were not addressed. So one of our tasks in this public education is to make sure the interim report to be the final report is not ignored. And it is a report that should resonate not only within California, but the entire country. However, while the interim report is groundbreaking, monumental work, its sheer length and sweep of history also makes it difficult for the public to absorb. The following slides discuss possible projects to make the interim report more accessible. I can't emphasize enough how important that is, because average American, average Californian has no idea of the harm that has happened. I thought I knew something about American history, but after going through this process of working with the DOJ staff to help develop the report along with the other members of the task force, things were uncovered I was not aware of. And I would guess most Americans think that racism ended after the Emancipation Act. And I think that's the state of where we are now. I totally agree. So basically, that's part of moving the needle of public opinion, and that whether it has to be done with the education system certainly does, but in other avenues that I'll talk about. So among other things, we would recommend the development of a curriculum and retention of a consultant, not in June of 2023, but right now, retention of the consultant to begin developing curriculum to work with the Department of Justice to complete and implement it after the task force ends. Curriculum development takes some time, may take 6 months or more. So again, these are things we need to set in motion now, which will continue after we go out of business. We recommend that the curriculum developed by the consultant, I wonder if we're at the right slide, be adopted by the legislature and become part of the state mandated educational requirements. Again, to deal with that issue about education, and that would be lesson plans for K-1 through 12. It would involve teaching modules for middle school, high school, and collegiate undergraduate schools in history and civics, social studies, race and society classes, ethnic studies, and so on. We need teacher training also. The teachers would, I'm guessing most, even those who are highly studied in this area, they'll learn something from the report. And so we need to teach the teachers to learn how to teach this material. Next slide, please. We need to recommend the creation of derivative and creative works and provide funding for such works. So examples of that would be to develop and distribute PowerPoint presentations of the interim report and on the 13 chapters. I could use, and each task force member could use those PowerPoints right now. And I've talked to Shauna Charles of the Charles Communications, and she's working on that. But we need those things to be circulated widely and available now and long after the task force ends. We need to retain producers to create documentary films. Those could be standard, the 1 hour version, or 30-minute, or six minute YouTube shorts, or 1 minute social media viral videos, or even 15-second TikToks that illustrate basically the need for reparations and why the rationale makes sense as a matter of simple justice. Audiobooks and audio chapters, excerpts recited by, it could be civil rights luminaries, actors, or other relevant celebrities, or people active in the community. I think Chris Lodgson has set an excellent example of reciting portions of the interim report. The Equal Justice Society, I've seen a concept video involving actors trained, reciting portions of the report, and it's powerful when trained actors recite this material. It comes across in a very powerful way. Next slide, please. That would mean retain producers to create, for example, dramatic works depicting events documented in the 13 chapters. We had a public commenter, Paul Williams, who had a poem that illustrates, in a nutshell, basically, why this is critical and needs to be done now. Training modules for people who run the portals of information. We talked about curriculum within the schools, but I think training modules for news editors, reporters whose beat is race, metro, U.S. politics, justice, criminal justice. It's important that they know the data on policing, on mass incarceration, on redlining, about why things are the way they are. I mean, one of the values of this report, connects the dots between the past and its present day ramifications and consequences, which are compounding and exponentially becoming worse. And so for those who are involved in controlling the portals of information, it's important that they have this background. And that involves public and private policymakers too. I'm glad that every legislator is going to get a hard copy of the interim report. But I think, again, we need to make that accessible and understandable in a way that is, you don't have to read a 500-page report. Next slide, please. So student, again, I'm just throwing out ideas here. Student contests for essays and video or multimedia productions. Students do that now. They're extremely creative. But I think these contests and competitions could be set up to encourage that. Convene public presentations on reparations with the participation of task force members and other leaders. In my college days, we called that teach-ins, but it was effective then. I think it would be effective now. I've had the pleasure of doing panels with Chair Moore, Cheryl Grills, and member Javon Scott Lewis, and those things have been well attended and they've done an excellent job. And we should continue to do that both during now, which we are, and then after the task force ends. We need to work with thought leaders and influencers to produce podcasts, meet with editors of mainstream and ethnic media to discuss the interim report and the repair recommendations. We need to partner with philanthropy to create funds for creative and artistic works, again, to amplify the message of this task force and of the public that has made meaningful comments today and in the past and will in the future. Next slide, please. So we're living in a short attention span society wherein sound bites move public opinion more easily than deep analysis. So that's the environment we work with, and so the messaging has to be tailored to that. And Shauna Charles yesterday talked about how communications consultants do that. At the same time, the task force is addressing a subject matter that has been suppressed and erased and is complex. And so, again, we need to develop new ways to get that story out conventionally in curriculum, but certainly in other ways. In order to support the understanding by the public of the rationale for the expenditure of public funds, and we're talking considerable amounts, as people have mentioned, through any legislative change, create the political will for that to happen, as well as to counter misunderstandings and the counter narrative that we're going to be hit with increasingly as the task force begins to mull over the actual recommendations. It would be helpful post June 30th, 2023, to have a consultant, communications consultant, continue to work with the agency that is overseeing this public education process to get this messaging out. And so that concludes my presentation, but we're talking about not only legislation and getting that done, but also changing this culture that continues to churn anti-Black bias and compounding and continuing the disparities that are today. So with that, I'll take any questions from task force members. And if there are none, we can move on to the next agenda item too.
Madam Chair,
Vice Chair Brown, you're recognized.
members of the task force, first of all, I commend Brother Don for his presentation. It's great information. And I would add, number one great British cleric said in a prayer, knowledge we ask not, knowledge thou hast lit, but Lord, the will, there lies our bitter need. Give us to build above the deep intent, the deed. Finally, in addition to the great work that he's done, ought we not remember that in this political setting, the reality is you must have lobbyists. Billions of dollars have been spent at the national level and at state level. And if our people going to get their well-deserved reparations, we need the same methodology of lobbyists that Assembly and the Senate, U.S. Senate, U.S. Congress have been moved to do the right thing because they had lobbyists. And if we're serious in this state about righting these egregious wrongs, they're far overdue. We must remember to face the reality that right now we have had the historical Colonel Murdaugh report. We had that report, the Kerner Commission. We've had that book, Two Nations, by Hacker, Two Nations, Unequal, Hostile, Divided. I can go on and on and cite these studies. We've studied enough the problem. But if this commission that was appointed by our governor at the encouragement of these two fine brothers over here, Brother Sawyer, Brother Breath, and our Secretary of State, I'm saying, for God's sake, let's deal with the real world. We have got to impact the will. The will. And when this study is turned in, we ought to hit the ground running after these Senate persons and Assembly persons have read that document. Then I make the motion that every one of them should have a copy of it now, so there'll be no excuse about they did not understand it. They ought to understand only that we are human beings, and as human beings, the wrong that was done to us need to be immediately enacted with goodness like yesterday. So thank you for your report, I repeat, and I do not make these comments in an adversarial manner, but I make these comments for the record, that the world may know that in this nation, unfortunately, they're still trying to turn the clock back. They're coming up with the nonsense about critical race theory. And we can write all the books, have all of the grades to present even to educators. If they don't have the will to understand that we are human and we deserve the same human respect that they get every day because they have been in the privileged crowd for all of these many years.
I can't agree with Pastor Brown more. And in order to change the culture, create the political will to get this done. I would add also, by way of messaging, Pastor Brown is a master of the metaphor. The house is on fire. And you take a complex story spanning 400 plus years, and the metaphor is the house is on fire. That's what we need to develop by way of public education now and then beyond the life of the task force. I'm reminded that the curriculum consultant that we recommend retaining, I need to make a motion on that. And so if the chair will allow me to make that motion, I'll make it. Can I proceed? So I move that the task force retain a curriculum consultant to be hired as soon as the contracting process will permit.
Second.
It has been properly moved by Member Tamaki and properly seconded by Senator Bradford that the task force hire a communications consultant as soon as the contracting process may permit. Is there any discussion on the matter?
Point of clarification. Point of clarification.
Excuse me. Yeah, go ahead.
I think it would probably be better to frame it as the task. You'd have it'd be part of your advisory committee's work, and then we will have future motions directing the work of the consultants.
All right, I'll try to state that more simply. So the motion is the task force directs the Department of Justice to retain a consultant to begin the work on curriculum and to be open to entertain further resolutions that would enable the consultant work to continue, assuming that it won't be finished by the time that task force sunsets, to continue the work to produce these deliverables after the task force ends. Is that accurate?
It has been properly moved by Member Tamaki and properly seconded by Member Holder that the task force direct the DOJ to retain a curriculum consultant with an understanding that this curriculum consultant could work on behalf of the task force after the task force sunsets, essentially. Is there any discussion on the matter? Hearing no further discussion, I'll turn to Parliamentarian Johnson for a roll call vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Beginning with Chair Moore.
Aye.
Chair Moore votes aye. Vice Chair Brown.
Aye.
Vice Chair Brown votes aye. Member Bradford. Aye. Member Bradford votes aye. Member Grills. Aye. Member Grills votes aye. Member Holder? Member Holder votes aye. Member Jones Sawyer? Aye. Member Jones Sawyer votes aye. Member Lewis? Member Montgomery Steppe? Aye. Member Montgomery Steppe votes aye. Member Tamaki? Member Tamaki votes aye. Madam Chair, there were 8 members present and voting. There were 8 ayes and no nays, and 1 member not voting.
There are 8 ayes, no nays, 1 member not voting. The ayes have it, and so the motion carries. We'll now turn to the next tabled item on the agenda, which is DOJ updates.
Can I make
Senator Bradford, you're recognized.
a quick suggestion? And I think if there's one takeaway from this report, and I thank Mr. Tamaki for it, is the fact that this body needs to live beyond June of next year. And that's a real critical situation that we really need to discuss, because it's one thing to have the report done by June, and that still should be the goal and objective, to have that final report. But the real work begins after this final report, and to continue to hear the fact that the task force will sunset then. I think that's when the task force is going to be needed the most at that time. So I'm willing to entertain a motion that this body support legislation to extend the shelf. Rolling out what we've heard, not only from our presentation, but also what we've heard from folks who've come to provide their public comment. The work begins after the final report, and that's when this task force will really need to roll up the sleeves and do the work and make sure we're all moving in the same direction.
Madam Chair, I would recommend that you schedule that for the next.
January, we can put that as an item to discuss for the January agenda. All right, we can move on to DOJ updates.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the task force. I just have 2 brief updates to share. One that is a request for an action item for this body. Last year, you approved the code, the conflicts code for this group, and it has been approved by the FPPC. One thing that needs to happen at this point is the final document has to be signed off on. It can be done either by a member of the task force or a member of the Department of Justice. And so we just need direction from you. If you would like to designate one of you to sign, it's purely an administrative function, but designate one of you to sign the code, or to designate a member of the Department of Justice staff to sign on behalf of the task force, just so that we can close the loop on that and get that returned to the commission. So that's one point. The other update that I wanted to provide is, and this is also for the benefit of the public, we do have confirmation for the January meeting dates, which are the 27th and 28th of January. That's a Friday and a Saturday. Again, hopefully because of the weekend dates, it will provide for more opportunity for public engagement and participation. That will be in San Diego, and our staff is working with member Montgomery Steppe to secure the location for that meeting. As soon as that location is secure, we'll make sure that that information gets to the task force members as well as the communications group to maximize the opportunity of time that we have to publicize the event so that more people can participate. So we're looking forward to that. We also have the February dates as well, which will be February 27th and 28th. And that will be taking place in Sacramento. And we will work with Senator Bradford's staff in securing all of the logistic details on that meeting date as well. That will be based on the task force vote. That will be the last in-person meeting, at least based on the current schedule. It's also subject to change depending on what the task force decides, but based on the previous vote of having in-person meetings through the February meeting, that will round out the locations that have been selected. And lastly, there is a remaining advisory group that we believe still needs to be established. We heard on yesterday with Chair Moore and Member Scott Lewis's presentation on the 5 framing questions. One of the issues that will still need to be addressed is the actual calculation of compensation. And so to the extent that the existing group that's working on that, which is Chair Moore and Member Scott Lewis, may be designated to do that task. That's up to the task force, or if the task force would like to establish a separate advisory group, that's also your prerogative to do. But we just wanted to flag that for your consideration in moving forward as what we see as a need that needs to be filled. So that concludes my updates. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take them. And otherwise, Madam Chair, we just need a motion to designate someone on the Code of Conflict signing.
Member Montgomery Step, you're recognized.
Thank you. I just have a quick clarifying question, Attorney Brown. For the February hearing, what are the exact dates of that? We have I think you said it's on a Friday and Saturday.
Date, that's a Monday and a Tuesday.
Yeah, okay.
That's not
Okay. You said the 27th and the 28th.
It's this, ironically, the same dates for both months, but they fall on different days.
Got it. Thank you.
And the February meeting, those were the dates that we had a quorum on that Monday and Tuesday.
Got it. Thank you.
So the first part, in terms of a designee for the conflict of interest code, we can entertain a motion to designate that road to the DOJ unless there's any volunteers who would like to sign on behalf of the task force. Is there a second? So it's been properly moved by Member Tamaki and properly seconded by Member Grills that we will designate the DOJ to sign the conflict of interest code on behalf of the task force. Is there any discussion on the matter? Hearing no further discussion, I'll turn to Parliamentarian Johnson for a roll call vote.
Thank you. I'll begin with Chair Moore.
Aye.
Chair Moore votes aye. Vice Chair Brown.
Aye.
Vice Chair Brown votes aye. Member Bradford. Member Bradford votes aye. Member Grills. Member Grills votes aye. Member Holder. Member Holder votes aye. Member Jones Sawyer. Member Jones Sawyer votes aye. Member Lewis.
Aye.
Member Lewis votes aye. Member Montgomery Step.
Aye.
Member Montgomery Step votes aye. Member Tamaki.
Aye.
Member Tamaki votes aye. Madam Chair, there were 9 members present and voting. There were 9 ayes and no nays.
Thank you, Parliamentarian Johnson. There are 9 ayes, 0 nays, 0 abstentions, and thus the motion carries as the ayes have it. And so the DOJ will be the designee to sign the conflict of interest code on behalf of the task force. The next point in terms of the DOJ updates that I had a question around was the Sacramento hearing for February 27th and 28th, which is a Monday and Tuesday. I want to ask if, to the pleasure of the task force, we could particularly try to revisit to see if there's another quorum we could establish, particularly if this is going to be our last in-person hearing, hearing what folks have said about, like, hearings being on the work days and things. It probably isn't the most strategic thing to have our last in-person hearing on a Monday and a Tuesday. If that's the only dates that work, that's perfectly fine with me. But I just wanted to raise that as an issue. And potentially the DOJ between now and January could put out another doodle poll to see if some other dates work better for us.
We can certainly do that. We can repoll the task force and narrow the availability to Friday, Saturday dates in the month.
Thank you. And then the other last part in terms of your agenda item is a potential action on creating a new advisory committee on calculations of compensation, correct? Okay. Bit more detail on that.
I'm gonna, is Kristen, oh, who wants to do it? Kristen? Okay, yeah, just 1 second.
So the existing advisory committee that you are on, Chair Moore and Member Lewis, is designed to answer the 5 questions of the experts. We had sort of wrestled in the last meeting about what the different advisory committees were to work through, and it would be logical for a separate advisory committee to deal with all the fiscal aspects of reparations. So there's a couple ways that can be done. Either, like I said, one advisory committee can do the fiscal aspects of reparations across all of those subject matter areas that the experts delineated previously, or that issue can be subdivided amongst the different advisory committees on the different specific topics. Those are the 2 models. If you do it separated by topics because of the Bagley-Keene Act, they would not be able to talk to each other. So the experts would be working on fiscal and monetary aspects of reparations with each of the different advisory committees separately, but not able to talk to each other. So if there's crossover issues or things like that, we'd have to wait until the next meeting to redress those. So those are the 2 models. Our recommendation would be to have one advisory committee handle the fiscal economic reparations aspect. What Damon referenced earlier, Attorney Brown referenced earlier, was that it could just be part of your advisory committee already, or you could set up a new advisory committee.
This advisory committee be working with the economic consultancy?
Yes.
Okay. Thoughts? Any volunteers if there's going to be an additional committee, or is there thoughts around should this be, each advisory committee should have its own fiscal component is essentially the conversation. Member Jones Sawyer, you're recognized.
I think the most important thing is to ensure that the public, the press, and everybody knows that we're working on a number, and that the committee as a whole has not made any final decisions. And even the number of 225 is not a maximum. If Black people need to get more money than that, we shouldn't cap us at that. But most important, that the committee, whoever's on this committee, that they keep the information as preliminary, interim, but not final, and ensuring that I don't have a problem with anyone being part of it. I just want to make sure that we're very mindful that that number on any one of these phases are going to be attacked. It's going to be attacked like you wouldn't believe. And so whatever number we come up with, we have to have consistency and hopefully 100% agreement that we all can defend when we turn in the final report. Otherwise, we're going to have distractions that are happening now with the press and advocates and activists shouting out numbers, and it's really a distraction. We really need to figure out what those numbers are, and then we need to hone it, solidify it, and then we stand behind it 1,000%.
Chair Moore.
Member Scott Lewis, you're recognized.
Thank you. So I just want to clarify that the number that has been going around, $223,000, was a number that came from publicly available materials. It was a number that was presented in our last meeting by the economic experts team. It was also a number that represented only the harm for housing. It was not a total number of the reparations. It was a calculation of what the economic experts could calculate for the housing harm specifically. So I just want that to be on record, and to note that neither the task force nor the economic experts team, made that number available through any kind of personal communication with the press, but that was all presented in our public meeting in Los Angeles in September, and it was reported on that basis. And so I just want to get that clear. For this issue of the advisory committee, I mean, there's a way that I think Chair Moore and I already, working with the economic experts, I think, satisfied a lot of that work. And so I think making it easiest is to just simply fold in, that responsibility into that scope of work. What I could also say, and I'm going to present on this later this afternoon, is that the racial wealth gap is that, and so in a way, with my responsibility working on the racial wealth gap issue, that is about the calculations, and we have some challenges there, and I don't want to, speak too soon here. But what I do want us to understand is that the interim report and the way that the various atrocities that the report represents has framed the racial wealth gap as a distinct harm or atrocity. In many ways, that's the incorrect way to approach the racial wealth gap. The racial wealth gap, as studied, as advocated for as a means of reparations, is meant to represent the total sum of the harms faced by Black Americans when we're talking about this issue at the federal level. And so in a way, yesterday, members of Montgomery Step and Bradford had, a wonderful presentation on issues facing Black businesses and so forth. Those also represent significant contributions to what we think of as the racial wealth gap. At the moment, what we have are 5 atrocities that we've been able to calculate, and in many ways, what those 5 atrocities represent, are 5 of the areas that cumulatively would represent the total sum of the racial wealth gap. So we will have to have a really serious conversation this afternoon about which philosophical approach we want to take to this issue of the racial wealth gap. And I'll give some further details, and economic experts will join us as well to kind of give further insight. So I just say that just, to kind of indicate that in many ways, a lot of this work is being done, I think in principle by Chair Moore and I, given just the relationship that we have with the economic experts team, and then with me specifically, working with them on the racial wealth gap. So in some ways it's covered, but also, I think the trouble here is that we're already doing this kind of, siloed initiative, because in principle, all of the chapters of interim report represent, right, what we can think of as the cumulative harms that are the racial wealth gap. So we may want to actually have a conversation about how to maybe rethink what we're doing in regards to the racial wealth gap, and what the kind of scope of responsibilities are in regards to these specific harms that are represented by other chapters.
Madam Chair, if I could just briefly respond. I think the framing of that is right, and I think that the approach to addressing those issues as you've laid them out would be the best way forward. We just wanted to make sure that the responsibility was clear as to where that particular function would lie, so that once we get to the end of the process, we're not still trying to figure out who's going to actually work with the economic team to make those calculations.
Entertain a motion on the matter. So we can get through the agenda. Oh, Member Montgomery Step, you're recognized.
Do we need a formal motion on that? Or can we continue?
Yeah, I think if there's just an understanding that the task force has as to the fact that that responsibility is going to, sounds like, remain housed with the existing advisory group, a motion wouldn't be necessary.
Thank you.
For that clarification, Attorney Brown and Member Montgomery Step. So for clarification of the public, in terms of the responsibility around addressing fiscal matters related to calculation for compensation, that responsibility will be retained by the advisory committee on the 5 expert questions. I shouldn't have said retained, but we did it. Okay. All right, the next item on the agenda is Advisory Committee report by Member Holder and Member Jones Sawyer. You both are recognized.
Yeah, I'm going to start there.
There it is.
Okay, great. All right, I want to first thank Member Jones Sawyer and his staff. It's been a pleasure and an honor to work with you all on this. And thanks to the DOJ advisors and partners for all of your insights and how gracious you have been and generous you have been in helping us put together this presentation. And thanks especially to Christina Trang for leading that effort with the DOJ. The housing recommendations we roll out are comprehensive and maybe even over-inclusive because our goal was to facilitate some brainstorming by the collective body on what the overall recommendation should look like. But our recommendations, certainly on housing and the criminal legal system, are not exhaustive. And they're certainly not final. We've heard what the public commenters said today, and we are going to certainly be informed by those comments as we think about finalizing these recommendations. Also, these recommendations should be interpreted and understood to be centered around remedying the harms to the descendant community. The task force interim report documents that much of the terror inflicted on first the enslaved and then the descendant community in California manifested as dehumanization through space and place. It started with extreme hostility to Black people's presence and existence in California, with fugitive slave laws to ensure that Black people were kept out or could only exist here in a state of abject spatial instability that severely undermined their personhood. The second regime of spatial terror was established after emancipation, where white society placed brutal limitation on Black people's mobility, movement, and spatial boundaries, using brutal policing, often Klansmen with police badges, and infrastructure policies like redlining, restrictive covenants, sundown times, freeway and railroad construction to either literally lock Black people behind prison walls or to erect spatial limitations so severe that they constituted imprisonment in blighted, unwanted, and environmentally hazardous spaces. This established a dynamic that tried to destroy Black people's liberation, sense of self, and again, personhood. When Black people, against the odds, managed to transcend these spatial and existential limitations and find imaginative ways to enrich their spirit, beautify their communities, secure their humanity and self-identity, and maybe even become economically viable through resilience and innovation, then the white supremacist spatial terror reemerged as a third wave of post-civil rights segregation policies. These apartheid policies included white flight, gentrification, and urban renewal, reinforced by mass criminalization and predatory policing. The third wave apartheid policies generated a cycle of push-out and displacement that ousted and continue to oust Black people from their cultural hubs and watering holes, once again undermining their cultural identity and sense of personhood. The following recommendations on fixing housing segregation and the criminal legal system are designed to end that pattern of spatial terrorism and repair the stigma and trauma to personhood caused by white supremacist spatial dynamics. Next slide. I'm going to focus my comments on fixing housing segregation policy proposals, and then Member Reggie Jones Sawyer will talk about fixing the criminal legal system with our reparations proposals. Next slide. You know, I come from a legal and constitutional scholarship background. So one of the things that I'm thinking about is how we are going to shore up our recommendations and make sure that they are legally viable, and to make sure that they can withstand judicial scrutiny if necessary. And so one of the preliminary recommendations that we are making is that whatever legislation and bills get put out there, they start off with certain findings. And from a legal constitutional standpoint, these findings will make them fortified and stronger legislation. And so we suggest that the legislation start off with findings that these are compelling and statewide interests in remedying the long-standing and ongoing harm caused by slavery, as documented by the task force report. We recommend that the findings state that the government of the state of California was involved and continues to be involved in this ongoing discrimination. And we recommend that the statutes state that the remedies are narrowly tailored to remedy the harm. Next slide. We also recommend that moving forward, the legislature institute disparate impact analysis with respect to proposed housing bills, housing codes, and government contracts pertaining to affordable housing to establish whether there is a disparate impact on the descendant community. Next slide. Another important procedural step from a legal standpoint is data collection, data collection, data collection. The legislature should provide nonprofits and experts with resources and fund capacity for collection, first, of anecdotal data, stories, narrative from the people who have suffered housing discrimination, money and resources to conduct focus groups so that we are collecting these stories. We should also require the government to collect and make transparent quantitative data and statistics on housing disparities. And that data, those statistics should be disaggregated, including disaggregation by descendant community. We recommend that the government provide resources to community-based organizations and subject matter experts to periodically analyze that data. So the data is not just sitting there warehoused. We need to be constantly analyzing that data, evaluating it, vetting it, to see, number one, if our recommendations and these bills are working and having an impact, and to see whether additional steps for remediation need to be taken to prevent the disparities from continuing. The next couple slides focus on the environment, climate change, and looking at intersectional justice. We had a commenter talk about generations
of her family that has suffered from cancer because of what's going on with the environment and the environment that Black people have been siloed into. So we need to be thinking about climate change, sustainability, and the environment as we think about reparations and reparatory justice. So we recommend that the government enact statewide responsible development standards, increase tree canopy coverage and access to green space in formerly redline communities, develop local climate resilience hubs in redline communities, end highway expansion in areas with high levels of pollution, restore communities that have been split and decimated by highways, remove lead in the drinking water, and establish rent control policies to prevent gentrification pushout. Because once we begin to remediate and fix these atrocities in housing, we don't want to then fix up these communities and then get pushed out like we always do. Next slide. We also need to be thinking about, from a public health and an environmental justice perspective, we need to be thinking about ending food deserts. We're suggesting subsidizing pipelines for healthy, whole foods to come into historically Black communities. Subsidies for Black farmers to supply organic and whole foods to Black families in urban communities, including subsidized Black farmers markets and things like urban gardens in redline neighborhoods, and also these emerging displacement communities that we are actually seeing in suburban neighborhoods. We need to have opportunities for urban gardens to make sure that we are feeding young people food that will feed their soul and feed their minds. The next several slides, we're going to be talking about fixing the horrible atrocity that we've learned so much about, redlining, and also curbing and fixing these patterns of gentrification that continue to displace and push African Americans out of their communities. And we're also going to be talking about expanding affordable housing. We recommend that the legislature increase enforcement of mandatory acceptance of housing vouchers, implement rent caps for historically redline zip codes, and not just rent control, but caps. Provide funding for developers, community-based land trusts, and community-based organizations of affordable housing operated by or serving descendants of enslaved people. We recommend that we redefine what qualifies as affordable housing by readjusting area median income limits for state subsidies. And that we provide funds for research on land grabs, land displacement, and land theft that we've heard so much about during the course of these hearings. Next slide. We recommend providing for a right of action or an immediate right to sue against banks, private entities, and financial institutions that knowingly and purposefully appraise Black-owned homes at lower values. We recommend we provide compensation for predatory housing industrial complex issues. So when Black folks and people in the descendant community are having to pay higher costs for insurance because they live in redline communities and race is a contributing factor, compensation is owed and needs to be provided. We also need to require state review and approval of residential land use ordinances. Address local zoning laws that reinforce and recreate housing segregation by requiring state agencies to review and approve all residential land use ordinances enacted by cities and counties with high levels of historic and ongoing housing segregation. And we need to employ mechanisms to join housing affordability with an anti-racism state of mind. So provide grants for community-based organizations and subject matter experts in equity and cultural competence and bias elimination to establish DEI certification programs for affordable housing contractors, providers, and decision makers. Dr. Grills yesterday talked about implicit bias and how implicit bias affects decision making every day when we're talking about housing decisions and who's going to get access. And so in order to create equity, we have to change people's minds and change the narrative, and people need to be educated. The people who are making these decisions about housing need to be educated. We need to repeal crime-free housing policies. These are the housing policies that eject people from their homes, homes that they may have lived in for decades and generations because of some association or accusation of crime. So require jurisdictions to review and modify or repeal any crime-free housing policies that result in disparate impacts or otherwise violate state or federal fair housing laws. Limit the scope of crimes and associations with criminal activity that qualify for eviction. Require landlords to use look-back periods and individualized assessment of relevant mitigating factors when reviewing evictions. And make affordable housing a fundamental right that allows for legal representation in eviction proceedings for the descendant community. Next slide. We need an overall global mechanism to increase affordable housing for descendants of enslaved people. We suggest requiring the Regional Housing Needs Allocation Program to explicitly advance racial equity and address the housing needs of descendants. Next slide. We need to think about the intersection of public health and housing and provide resources for expansion of public health infrastructure that Black folks have access to. So in neighborhoods heavily populated by the descendant community, we need more hospitals, funding for more hospitals, community-based mental health facilities, urgent care facilities, medical training programs, first responder ambulance services, all staffed by culturally competent providers. We need support for community-based organizations and programs and research groups that use the housing first model and harm reduction models to work with chronically homeless, dually diagnosed populations suffering from mental illness and sometimes addiction due to self-medication. We need mobile crisis units staffed with psychiatric experts to assist chronically unhoused people instead of criminalizing poverty and homelessness. And we need to fund housing-focused anti-racism education programs and communications to help communities move away from the NIMBY, not in my backyard mentality, and move toward a reparatory justice, abundance mentality instead of a scarcity mentality. Next slide. When it comes to home ownership, we need to expand first-time home owner grants to community-based organizations working with the descendant community, and make sure that those grants are being distributed to members of the descendant community through these CBOs. We also need to facilitate a process for CBOs, community-based organizations, to buy property in historically Black neighborhoods and watering holes, to act as a bulwark against Black pushout and displacement. If we have community-based organizations that own property in these communities, then we will always have a foothold, a stronghold, an organizing and mobilizing stronghold in our communities. And then with regard to fixing the wealth and asset gap and expanding home ownership. One of the ways that society has been able to keep Black folks from having access to infrastructure is by keeping us siloed in these communities where we are not given any services. And so when people want to be able to move to areas where they do get services, good public education, regular garbage collection, things like that, we need to create a mechanism so people can easily move about and be mobile. We have been kept immobilized and trapped for way too many decades and centuries. And so we need to create a regime that allows for the free movement of Black people. It's true bodily liberation. You can go where you want to go. And one way that we can do that is through property tax relief that allows the descendant community to keep their property tax valuations and without having to pay huge hikes in property taxes if they move to other neighborhoods. And finally, provide direct financial assistance to increase home ownership. We need to provide things like shared appreciation loans, and we need to subsidize down payments, mortgage payments, and homeowners insurance fees for descendants of enslaved people who reside in formerly redlined areas. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Member Reggie Jones Sawyer, to discuss the legal system policy proposals.
And thank you. And the first part of it, as they pull up my, I don't know how long it'll take. Okay, as they pull it up, we also on the unjust legal system policy proposal. Next slide. We also believe that requiring legislative findings on compelling statewide interests and narrowing, tailoring it is really important also in the criminal justice system and making sure that that's there. Next slide. And then also, as was stated earlier by Attorney Holder, requiring disparate impact analysis on the criminal justice system, judicial, at the policing level, and in the prison level is really important as we move forward. Next. So the first thing we looked at is something that Mr. Bradford and I have been working on, unfortunately unsuccessfully, is to abolish involuntary servitude from the California Constitution. In layman language, abolishing slavery out of our California Constitution. We made a valiant effort with the California Legislative Black Caucus to get it done. Unfortunately, through friends of ours, progressives, it didn't make it out of the Senate. And it is still today, slavery, as far as incarceration is concerned, is still on the books here in California. And we need to make another effort to eliminate and abolish those phrases out of it. Next slide. We also looked at funds and allocating monies really to remedy harms and promote some kind of opportunity. And one of the things that we looked at is, as the money goes down, that maybe we give the money to grants to community-based organizations that work in the areas of reentry and public safety. One, we know these community-based organizations will make sure that the money gets exactly to where it needs to go, people who are repatriated back in the community, but also they have a will to make sure that they're successful. We do not want to give the money to municipalities, no disrespect to municipalities, but sometimes that money ends up back in law enforcement's hands. And that is not the purpose of this. We wanted to get back to the Black community and to Black-based organizations. Abolish cash bail. If you know anything about cash bail, it's used to keep us in prison, but it's also used to make sure that we can't accumulate wealth. Bail companies take a large percentage, and even if you're found innocent, they keep that percentage. And so we're looking at eliminating cash bail. Fund education for students who are descendants of enslaved people pursuing legal, medical, and science degree. We should fund African Americans who want to come back to our community that look like us to be able to help our people in those critical fields. Establish grants to incentivize Black employment and law enforcement. Maybe they could be a little bit better if we have more African American law enforcement officers who understand us, who don't look at us as the enemy, but look at us as human beings. Allow expungement and or compensation for loitering convictions. A lot of times these jaywalking tickets and others are just precursors setting up what they call putting a jacket on you, so that as you move through or you have other incidents, it just builds and builds and builds to where they can incarcerate you even more. Increase exoneration reimbursements, lost wage calculations. As you've been noticing in the press, more and more people are found to be innocent, and they've been locked up for 10, 20, 30 years. Think of all the lost wages that they've lost. And when they are exonerated, they're given $100 and a pat on the back. But they've lost all of that money, all of that time, all of the time with their families. And that's all we do to compensate for their losses. Compensate individuals on probation so they become more successful when they get out, instead of just, again, giving them meager ways of earning a living and being able to repatriate themselves into society. Next slide. End 3 strikes sentencing. We all know the 3 strikes law is the way that they mass incarcerated here in California. Adopt interim measures as needed to restrict application of strike enhancements pending full appeal. In addition, they use 3 strikes to sometimes coerce folk, especially folk that look like us, into making confessions at the risk of them being incarcerated even longer. Mandate and promote anti-bias policing. Mandate implicit bias policies and training for all law enforcement. Promulgate uniform and mandatory law enforcement policies related to all aspects of police investigation, and protect anti-bias trainers from harassment and retaliation. Individuals in law enforcement who want to do the right thing a lot of times are not allowed to do it, and in fact are ostracized and given a hard time, or even having trouble promoting through the ranks. We need to have a total overhaul of law enforcement, especially when it comes to African Americans. Next slide. Restore civil rights for justice-involved individuals. Restore voting rights for all incarcerated individuals. We have people, African Americans, all over this state that are not in Black communities or former Black communities. They've been shipped off to the far-off reasons here in California, and that voting power is lost. And when they get out, a lot of them don't even know they have their rights restored. We should seriously look at allowing individuals who are incarcerated to be able to have voting rights. Because again, that's a large, unfortunately, that could be a large portion of our population that can vote and have the best African Americans concerns more so than anybody else. Prohibit State Bar from considering certain incidents in moral character assessment. We've been working with the State Bar for quite some time. Monitoring attorneys is not working. We need to have a more robust system to look at what the moral character of the attorneys and what they're doing to their clients, especially with African American clients. Next slide. Decriminalize public disorder infractions. Transfer public disorder infractions out of the criminal justice system and divert to public health and safety institutions. Again, the homeless, we should not criminalize them. It is a public health problem. People who have substance abuse problems, it's a public health problem. It's not a criminal problem. They need the kind of help that anybody that has the money, they just put themselves to some type of mental health facility or substance abuse facility. We need to provide that for them. Otherwise, they're languishing out there in the street. And Los Angeles County Jail is the largest mental health facility in the country. That alone should be a crime, because none of those people in there should be treated as criminals. Confirm and expand the criminalization of fare evasion and other low-level transit violations. Again, traffic stops have sometimes become very fatal, and we need to decriminalize some of these problematic things. Next. Prohibit pretext stops. Bar traffic stops for low-level traffic violations. Just because you can't see my license, you shouldn't pull me over, pull your gun out, and create a situation where it's problematic. Preclude officers from inquiring as to probation status or from requesting absent probable cause consent to search during traffic stops. Again, these traffic stops, as many of us know, not only are dangerous, but when you see those red lights pull up behind you as an African American, it is probably one of the most traumatic experiences you can feel. And to know that if you reach for your wallet, or you reach for your insurance, or you reach for anything in your glove compartment could be fatal. It's just not acceptable. And it seems to be more fatal for us. And so we need to really look at stopping some of these pretext stops. Next slide. Oops, I went too fast. Okay, call on federal government to end qualified immunity. So qualified immunity is a fancy word for law enforcement, even though as you look at the film, or as you look at what happened, or as people talk about what happened during that incident where somebody is fatally killed, it is within the law, or is within policy, is within their right to do it. And you can't convict them. And so we need to really look at qualified immunity and really take a serious look at how to change it or end it. And call on the federal government to follow suit. Next slide. Eliminate school to prison pipeline. Probably one of the things that we as a community, as a group, really need to hone down on. And it's something that we probably should have started doing a long time ago. If we eliminate police and probation officers from schools and reallocate funding to trauma-informed supports and programming, you don't know how many prisons I've been to where young people talk about not having the trauma support that they need in school. Instead, they're met with school police, or they bring in the real police to come in because their behavior is not comporting to what the teachers want. And their solution is to criminalize you and have law enforcement come in. We need people and counselors, psychiatrists to come in and talk to our young people and find out what the root cause of maybe their disturbance and not just automatically criminalize them. Requires specified distances between schools and jails and police precincts. This thing of having a police substation on a elementary, middle school, or high school just says we're treating your kids like they are predisposed to going to prison, and we need to automatically have them around law enforcement so they can then train them into becoming offenders. Mandate presumptive diversion for minority of youth arrests. Limit and shorten juvenile probation. Bar strike enhancements for juvenile convictions. What you do at 12 or 11, because you come from a lot of trauma in your home, should not carry with you for the rest of your life. You're a kid, and kids do stupid things. But most important, if you're a kid that's been raped, been traumatized, you see nothing but murder around you, your whole understanding of what right is wrong is going to be skewed. And so to convict a young person at a very young age and say for the rest of your life, you're just going to be a bad person is wrong. End adult prosecution of youth, and end racially disparate discipline through timely assessment of data and corrective measures to address disproportionality. We need to look at the numbers and see what a lot of things are doing. And then finally, we need to strengthen and expand the Racial Justice Act, RJA, which was recently enacted, to actually look at the criminal justice system and see where they are not only racially biased, but they have used color as a way to criminalize us and keep us into jail. So we should establish statewide conviction integrity unit through which the state alternatively reviews cases for RJA violations, codify compensation scheme for successful RJA claimants, ensure all necessary data is collected and provided to facilitate RJA claims, expand RJA to cover parole and post-conviction proceedings, and then allow RJA claims to challenge prior strikes alleged in new matters. So as we went through this, I'm a little bit older than some, and for you young people, there's a book and there's a movie called Sounder. And in the movie was Cicely Tyson and Paul Winfield. It's a family of sharecroppers in the South. They're so poor. They're so poor. They don't have any meat. So one day the father steals a ham. After he steals the ham, he's incarcerated in prison, put on a chain gang. While he's there, he gets crippled. But you see the family, the mother, now a single mother raising these kids, and they have nothing. They're eating cornmeal, nothing. The main breadwinner is gone. And they just totally disenfranchised the black family. And it showed to me how the criminal justice system, our public safety system, what it has done to our community and what it will continue to do to our community unless we do something to stop it. Because at this point in time, we're doing all we can in California right now to reverse a lot of it, but we need to accelerate it and to do more. Because in my opinion, where there's specific harm that is intentional, a lot of it's in the criminal justice system. And we need to stop that flow of racism coming through our community using a badge. And I'll leave you with this. I have in my office a group of badges. There used to be badges from slave hunters. And slave hunters used to have badges. And if you look at those badges, they look just like sheriff badges. If you look at the way they used to capture slaves, those same policies, procedures are being used today to incarcerate African Americans. It has not stopped. And so we need to look at our history so we can stop it from happening today, because it is not only prevalent, but is unbelievably damaging. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Holder and Member Jones Sawyer, for that incredible presentation. Let's give a hand to them. Not sure if we wanted to recognize the attorneys you all worked with on this effort, if you all had any
Ms.
comments.
Holder did, and it's, you know, it's a pleasure working with people that'll call you. You give your suggestions, and then it shows up in a cogent, professional way. So I commend everyone on your team. I think I can speak for Attorney Holder. Not only was obviously it was a labor of love, and obviously we're a little emotional when it comes to this, but you made it easy on us to be able to get this done. And so we want to thank you for that.
Madam Chair.
Vice Chair Brown, you recognize.
Members of the task force, I want to commend Joan Sawyer, Brother Bradford, for this excellent presentation, and hook up with Brother John Sawyer and say, you quoted from that movie Sounder. But the flip side of that crisis of the family is that on that Sunday morning, when they were passing that church, the question was raised, what's going on in there? And somebody retorted that even the Lord won't be able to get in there to find out what's going on. Because it was the wrong kind of religion. It was slave religion. But as they marched home, in spite of their challenges, they started singing that song, Jesus, won't you come by here? Oh, Jesus, won't you come by here? Come if you don't stay long. For now is a needy time. Not only was it the needed time for them, for the right Jesus to show up, but they were singing about the right spirituality. Not this white evangelical junk that's around here in this nation right now. That's full of nationalism and racism. And they have been used as tools to turn the clock back. I couldn't resist saying that when you quoted from Sounder. Well, they knew the right Jesus. They knew the difference between a nationalistic Jesus and Jesus the liberator that we ought to be, all as black folks, having a conversation with. Thank you.
Member Goes, you recognize.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank members Joan Sawyer and Holder for that very comprehensive set of recommendations. And I know, Member Holder, you said that almost apologetically that it was potentially overly inclusive, but I would say it's not overly inclusive. We are dealing with a set of circumstances that were extremely pervasive, touching every aspect of Black life and American social and political and economic reality. So it's going to require a large number of components to address it. And I'm also struck by something that I kind of foreshadowed in my presentation, that there may likely be overlap. And I definitely saw some, and I think that's okay because these things intersect. So my question is to DOJ, I think, what will be the appropriate mechanism that doesn't violate Bagley-Keene so that we can figure out how to synthesize recommendations that reflect overlap? Would it be through the members of DOJ, or, would there be, it would be permissible for example, a one-on-one conversation with someone, with like Member Holder on her recommendations, one with Member Jones Sawyer on his. I just want to make sure we stay in compliance, but also get the work done.
Absolutely. Glad to have everyone thinking about that. Based on our discussion about how this is proceeding, we're going to take everything in off of these recommendations, and we're going to prepare a document for the next meeting. That document is going to sort of include a synthesis of everyone's recommendations, delineated by the current sort of assignments. Everyone's going to be able to see that document. Everyone's going to be able to see the sort of body of recommendations, and everyone will be able to look at where the overlap is, and then we'll discuss that in the next task force meeting. But certainly what we are trying to do, without obviously engaging in a spoke and wheel, spoke and hub and spoke communication, is making sure that where different issues overlap, we're addressing it with the relevant advisory committees in a way that's comprehensive, in a way that sort of builds on each other's recommendations rather than splits them up. So that's going to be the goal. We're not entirely sure. I think it's going to be probably more of an outline format. If you recall, during the first segment, we came back to you all with outlines, and we had a vote on the outlines, whether you authorized us to move forward with final preparation based on the outlines. So it's probably going to be similar to that. And then those will also be public.
Any other questions or comments for Member Holder, Member Jones Sawyer? Member Montgomery Stepp, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair Moore. I also just want to say thank you to Member Holder and Member Jones Sawyer for the presentation. Just a lot of good recommendations. I have a lot of questions, but I'm really, really interested, Member Holder, in what you talked about with regard to area median income and changing that. Right now in San Diego, the area median income, I think, is $106,000 or something like that. And then when affordable housing developers are building housing, they go from that area median income and it becomes 80% of that or 60% of that, which is still a heck of still very high. So I don't know if I just wanted to ask you if you thought about ways to get that reduced, and kind of what type of formulas are out there. What was the thought process around that recommendation?
Thanks for that question. Member Jones Sawyer and I worked on this together. The median, reducing the median income was his brainchild. So I'm going to turn it over to him to discuss.
I know we got to go to lunch, so I'll talk to you. I think I can talk to you separately on that.
That's totally fine. I thought it was a really cool recommendation.
And by the way, I just want to clarify earlier when it's been brought to my attention by both of my colleagues that I didn't directly answer your question, which is the next meeting. The next meeting is when everyone will be able to talk through all of the different recommendations as a whole.
Any other questions or comments for Member Holder and Member Jones Sawyer? Okay. So in terms of procedure, since this is the first report back of the day, can you just recap what we discussed yesterday in terms of next steps?
Sure, I'll recap, and then it may be good to check in on the agenda. So what we're doing today with each of these modules is we're talking through them. It's each member's, as I just mentioned, this is the opportunity to raise any objections or to share any additional items that you think that the advisory committee members should be including, as well as any requests for the Department of Justice. If there are topics that you're not on the advisory committee, but you think the Department of Justice should be looking at on any of these modules, you can tell us that you want us to look into those as well, and we'll do that and then work with the advisory committee members and incorporate that into our presentation in the next meeting. We're not doing votes on everything. If there's no strong objection, we're moving forward to the next meeting. Is that what you're asking for?
Thank you. So any objections, things that want to add, subtract? Okay, great. Thank you all so much. Let's give a hand. So it is 12:12 p.m. We are into our lunch period. We will resume the hearing at 1 p.m. Thank you.
The way it currently stands, forced labor, slavery takes precedence over rehabilitation and public safety.
Oh, by the way, while the Biden administration gives reparations to everyone but free people, look at the billions he has run over to Ukraine.
We don't have black grocery stores because if you think about it now, just to get in that supply chain, it's almost unheard of.
They don't want the truth to get out. Okay? I don't want to know what my family did or what all these people did and all this stuff like that. Okay? You read that 500-page report.
There's this thing called white superiority and black inferiority. That mindset allows all of the behaviors that we've seen across generations, allows for the construction of these policies and practices and systems and structures that continue to oppress us. This is not a handout. This is a debt that is owed.
You know, Allensworth was like the internet of his time in 1904, 1905.
The total black population in California is about 2.6 million, and then of that, the descendants compose about 2.2 million of that. So California, with a multi-billion-dollar surplus, can absolutely afford to satisfy the international terms for reparations, beginning with compensation.
Any financial obstacle that exists that impedes the success of increasing financial prosperity needs to be dealt with and eliminated.
No matter where we've been, no matter what part of this fight we've been in, we've been harmed, and we've had harm done to us specifically.
When I got to Los Angeles, this was some of the worst segregation I'd ever seen. And remember, I'm telling you, I'm from Mississippi.
Because as you can see, I'm giving you broken history right now, you know? But I had to give it to you guys today. I said, no, I got to show them this because it's so precious and nobody really knows about it.
Black people don't have that kind of luxury. Our historically black communities have been redistricted multiple times.
Now listen, if you can't handle the TR roof, don't tune in.